Most of the focus these days is on youth mental health problems. Empower Youth is about youth mental health solutions.
The event is a conversation with top mental health advocates along with passionate youth mental health promoters.
4 session topics: healthy lifestyle choices, finding meaning and purpose, addiction and substance abuse, and having a healthy relationship with money.
We welcome your input and are excited to answer your questions during the event, which is produced by Soaring Profits, brought to you by Brighton, and sponsored by the Scanlon School for Mental Health and Inovia Brain Health.
And we are live. Hi, and welcome to Empower Youth. The goal of today is to provide a platform for you out there to be a part of our discussion and to remove the stigma of mental health and all of us rise above. When Jeff asked us to produce the show, the team at Soaring Profits was immediately on board. At this time, we would like to thank our sponsors, Lucas Cadden, CEO and founder of Inovia, and the Scanlon Center of mental health, and of course, Jeffrey Johnson, the founder of Brighton app. Thank you for joining us and for stepping forward and making our future a priority. Pat, go ahead.
Well, folks, again, thank you so much for joining us with Soaring Profits. I'm Patrick. That gentleman there that was running through that is James, my partner in crime with Soaring Profits. And we do a fantastic podcast focusing on people's stories. We work with people, we bring on fantastic guests, and mental health has been something that we've really championed for the last number of months and for the last year or so doing the podcast. And these folks around you today that you can see, these guys here, they are action takers. They're making changes around the world. And each one of them has taken an opportunity and has said yes. And they've come here today. They're engaging with the youth, not just having individual conversations of adults talking about youth. This is adults bringing youth to the table and having a great discussion. We're thrilled to be a part of it. We're thrilled to be moderating and hosting it. And I want to thank all of them. So today we have the fantastic Raquel Borres, Rock the Boat organization. She does fantastic work with the youth, getting them involved, letting them know what they are, who they are, and how they're being better for society. We also have Lucas Cadden, the CEO of Inovia Behavior and Behavioral Health. Thank you so much. He's also one of our main sponsors here today. Again, without our sponsors to put this event on, this wouldn't be able to happen. So I want to thank Lucas for that. We also have our guest, Jeffrey Johnson. Mr. Jeffrey Johnston, he was one of the main reasons why this happened. The Brighton app is working and focusing on helping individuals proliferate the conversation. They want to work with the youth and get them involved. We also are very lucky to have Miss Riley Lucan, and she is with the University of Iowa, and she's working on the Strikeout Stigma campaign, and Soraya Sampson of Young People in Recovery. Miss Raquel, we go back a long way. It's a pleasure to have you. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what finding meaning and purpose means for you and how that's kind of worked with your Rock the Boat campaign. And more importantly, what are you seeing with the youth that you're initiating conversations with and bringing them to the table? What are they saying?
Well, thank you, Patrick. And I'm so excited to be here. So for me, I started Rock the Boat because when I was younger, late teen in college, I actually attempted to take my own life. And for the longest time, for years, actually for decades, I kept it hidden because of the stigma around it and because of the negative narrative around, trying to take your life. And it wasn't until I actually shared my story several years ago that through sharing my story, I found my meaning and purpose, which is to empower our youth. And what I have learned is that you need to be able to empower someone by being able to hear them, really listen to what they have to say, see them and value them. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do. And that's why I'm here today.
Yeah, absolutely. Lucas, maybe you can talk a little bit about what you folks are doing with Inovia in the behavioral health aspect and how what you folks are working with, again, are touching the youth, working with them and developing the future of society. If we don't have our youth on the right track, it's going to be a problematic situation. Maybe you can touch base on that for us, pal.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again, everybody, for putting this on and for having us. And I've worked in this space now for like 23 years, and really wanted to come up with something that helped a broader audience. And what we see is there's a lot of people, because of the stigma, for example, that you're talking about, and other things, where they're not accessing services for whatever reason. And so what we do is we create an atmosphere for people to join into live groups that are educational, experiential, and therapeutic support groups. And help support each other, and where you can talk about things that are meaningful. You can talk about things like Raquel talked about, and share things about your past, but also help support each other going into the future. And that doesn't have to look like I need a diagnosis, I need necessarily treatment, or I need this other thing, but how can we continue to, again, provide support for each other, and then keep that conversation moving forward.
Yeah. Amazing, pal. And again, we thank you so much for you folks sponsoring this. This is getting right to the heart of the issue, getting people involved, engaging our youth. And I think that leads perfectly into a couple of our youth, a couple of our advocates, our youth advocates that are out there. Riley Lucan and Soraya, I'm sorry, I will not get that wrong again. Soraya Sampson. Maybe if you ladies can kind of kick us off a little bit about what you're hearing in your community right now.
I guess I can start off. I think one of the really cool things that I've just talked about with like my friends and the people I've had the opportunity to work with is that we want to talk about this topic, and we want to not be as like hush hush about it anymore. We want it to just be normal, and something that it's like saying, oh, I have knee problems. It's the same thing as saying, oh, sometimes I have brain problems, or I feel this way. So that's kind of what I've been hearing and experiencing, especially at being a freshman in college. Like, it's been a very new experience, obviously, with lots of emotions.
Right. Soraya?
Absolutely. So I'm kind of in a weird age. I would call myself a zillennial. Like I'm right in the middle of things. And so, yeah, I think in the last few years, the general mindset has been a lot more, accepting, and a lot more curious, right? I think people are, have more access to information more than ever before. And I think a lot of youth, a lot of people our age are using that access to information to explore these topics, and really, seek out some of the services and seek out the help that they need in a way that we haven't really seen before. So I think there's a lot of positive changes.
And I would be remiss without bringing in Mr. Jeffrey Johnston. We kind of vagued over that one with the bright.
No, I'm fine. Just sitting back listening to these
hanging
people
out.
talk. Yeah.
Jeffrey, tell me why Brighton's important and what you're doing.
Well, I'll go a little bit further back and talk quickly about meaning and purpose, and then how Brighton fits into that picture. But yeah, I mean, when we were looking at ways to develop curriculum and ways to help young adults navigate through life, one glaring thing that came up on all the statistics was this lack of meaning and purpose, and so when I go around, when I speak about our living undeterred, better, not bitter, around the country, I talk a lot about meaning and purpose. So I thought, well, maybe I'll take some of what I know about talking to adults about it. Why wouldn't that be the same with talking with young adults? So to me, meaning and purpose, and I like to ask Soraya and Riley this question, to me, it's about service. It's about being in service of others. I think when you do something for somebody else, there's something beautiful about that. It makes you feel good. And fortunately, the way society's set up, everything's me. You got selfies, you got posts of all the stuff. And we're going to talk about social media a little bit later, so I don't want to get distracted. But going back about meaning and purpose, do you guys feel service and giving back is a big part of meaning and service, or do you guys feel that there are other avenues to get to meaning and purpose in your life?
I'm so glad that you talked about service. I actually started my entire career at 16 in AmeriCorps. I don't know why I was accepted into AmeriCorps at 16. I think they were really, really desperate. They put me in Kansas City, which shows how desperate they were, right? Because like nobody wanted to go to Kansas City. But that was my very first experience away from home, living on my own, was direct service, right? And it was during that gap year where I really, was able to take some time to explore what was important to me, right? And what I was passionate about, what were the things that I loved to do, right? And that first year of service turned into more service and more. I stayed in AmeriCorps too long, but now I still work in public service in the nonprofit space, and so I feel very strongly about this. I don't know, as a child who, as a young person who came from poverty, who, has had a very up and down life. I don't know if I would be where I am now without the opportunities that service provided, but also not just professionally, but I think the opportunities for personal growth, right? I was able to learn and experience things that I would have never been exposed to if I had just gone straight into college. And so I really think, even if it's not a gap year, even if it's not AmeriCorps, I think youth really need to be out there in their communities and really need to be engaging, and it can be fun, Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I
Riley?
definitely agree. I think service is such an interesting thing because when you first say service, I think of like volunteering at like hospitals and with youth groups and stuff like that. But the big thing that I feel like I've realized is that service can also just be to others in one-on-one, and it can just be sitting and listening to someone when they just really need to talk it out. And then it can be very large scale and it can be very small scale. And that's what the great thing about service is. So you can just go look for it wherever it is there for you.
I got a question for, and thanks for the answers. Those are great answers. Lucas, I was going to ask you,
Yeah.
Does purpose find you or do you find it? I mean, when you found your why,
Mhm.
in my case, it was revealed to me through death, but do you have a thought onto how you figured out your purpose on your own, or is it something that just showed up one day in your life?
It kind of smacked me in the face a lot of times over the years, to be honest with you, before I finally realized for myself. And so that's a good question. I think it's a little bit of both. For me, it sort of happened a lot later in life. I mean, I wound up being really lost and purposeless in college, for example, and that's how I fell into the behavioral health field and found a bunch of incredible people who did just that, wanted to help other people. And so it was like staying in that along the way. And then it wasn't until I turned 40 plus that I realized that, that I had been doing things my whole life that brought me to this space. And that's where I realized what my purpose was to help people feel better, however that may look. And like Riley said, it could just be sitting and listening sometimes, or it could be coaching a team, or it could be volunteering at an activity, or whatever it is. So I think it's kind of both, honestly.
Raquel, kind of a follow-up question with that. Where does, gratitude play into all this? I mean, a sense of like feeling grateful for, being alive, first of all. I mean, does that help somebody kind of figure out what their meaning and purpose is? I mean, we hear gratitude thrown out all the time, and I know you and I've talked about this before, but
Yeah, I believe so. And a lot of times people think gratitude has to be something big, right? Like
Right.
when I wake up in the morning, sometimes I'm grateful that I just can sleep in, like, that I had that extra hour. Like, wow, I'm really grateful that I was able to have that extra hour of sleep. It's really finding, just gratitude anywhere. And there's something about having that sense of like you're grateful. It really does something to you. You know how they say, like dopamine and all these things and the music. I feel like it's the same thing when you're actually telling yourself, thank you for this. Or, I'm so, I mean, at least for me, now I've come to a place where knowing that I tried to take my life and I tried to, end it when I was in my 20s. So for me to be now alive, like that to me is just every day. I'm so grateful for it. And because of that, I've learned, of service, same thing, where that's exactly what I'm doing now is, have this YouTube channel where I talk to kids and I listen to them. And that's how I give back, and by mentoring. So it's not necessarily like you're going out actually volunteering, but yes, just being service to others. It's amazing how it really does fulfill you. I think people don't realize how fulfilling it is until you actually do it. Like I think people miss out on it because they have this preconception of what it means. I'm like, no, you'll be surprised of like just what it does to your heart and to your soul.
Yeah, it's hard to explain. I think with us older people, we have the benefit of some experiences. We have a little bit of benefit of hindsight and wisdom. And when you're younger, you don't really have all that data that you can take and say, wow, this, I understand now. I've been to so many. At your age, you guys are going to go to baby showers and weddings. We go to funerals now, and it's just so many every year, and it seems like every week I know somebody in one of my circles that died. I'm 57, so I have a lot more just respect and awe for life, and I'm very grateful for where I'm at. And so with younger people, I always think maybe they don't have that level of experience that they can really have too much hindsight and being grateful. So, I mean, do you guys ever struggle with trying to find meaning and purpose, or do you have friends that you talk to about? Because it seems to me that having this benefit of hindsight is a really big plus.
Well, I know for
That's
me,
good.
being an older man, you know what? A benefit and purpose is really important. With my friends and the people I like being around, I tend to choose the friends that raise me up now. Like
Yeah.
when I was younger, it was kind of like I let anyone into my world. I let anyone into my group. I allowed anyone to be a part of what I was doing. And what I found quite often is that it would actually hold me back and drag me down, because some of them would breed negativity that would send me into a negative cycle or make me lean towards negative choices. So now I pick people like Rock the Boat and Jeff and Pat there. They're all leaders. They're all innovators. They're all people who move forward. Now, ladies, do you find that are you looking for that now that you guys are trying to start off your life, your careers, or are you more like I was in the beginning, where I was like, if you're around me, you can be in? Like, are you looking for a specific type of friend?
Go ahead.
I'll go, then you go. I would say I'm kind of the later. I'm just kind of like, I see you, you look cool, let's talk and hang out and see where it goes. I would say that I tend to be a little bit more aware that it's okay to have friendships fizzle out and stuff and dynamics to change over time. It's very natural and normal. So that's kind of where I stand there.
I am very much, I like to call myself an omnivore, right? So I am, I have a very small circle of friends, and they're people who are really weird, and they're into like, all of the weird niche things that I'm into. And like, we're able to like have debates and, but I'm also, again, like slightly on the older end of Gen Z. So, after college, I think in college when I was younger, I had a lot of like, I had a very like puppy dog mentality, and I wanted to be friends with everybody. And, I think, a few bad roommates, and eventually you realize, I started to get a little bit more selective, but I also think that's partially to do with like, the pandemic and a lot of the things that we've gone through in the last couple of years. I've been working remotely since 2019. I'm sure a lot of people have. And I think that can be kind of isolating and can make it a little more difficult to find that connection, especially amongst youth our own age in the last week.
There's an old saying, an old Stoic saying, where your attention goes, your energy flows. And I love that saying. And I think with young people today, and I'm not going to pick on young people because, man, us older people are on our phones probably just as much as you guys are. But, if you get up in the morning and get on your phone and you go to TikTok or to whatever you're at, and you see just repeatedly these videos of fights, and you watch highlights of the debate and everyone's yelling at each other, then you see a climate change protest, and it's like, I think it sets that tone for the rest of your day. And I think you struggle with trying to find meaning and purpose if you're always putting out fires. Do you guys see that as a barrier to your generation trying to find some, because it seems like your generation really, really lacks that meaning and purpose, and it's a combination of many things. I know that.
I love the news. I studied politics, and I love a good debate. I used to love the debates.
Yeah, me too.
And yeah. They're very different now, and the whole atmosphere is very different now. And so when I open my phone in the morning, that is I can't even lie, that's the first thing I do is I'm going to open Reddit and I'm going to check the news, right? I'm going to see what happened the night before, and that's how I start my day. But honestly, I don't really think it sets my mood off too much, because to be honest, I don't think there's ever been a time since I was born in 98. So my entire life has been financial crises and wars and more financial crises and political division and global warming and all of this stuff. And so I think, honestly, I'm very used to the doom and gloom of it all. And I think my attitude towards a lot of the news these days is kind of stoic. Not stoic. I want change, but a little bit more like, it's not terrifying, because it's been terrifying for a long time.
No, I absolutely follow you. And I just want to say hi to Siobhan. I just met her today. And I'm going to be on her podcast next week. So I know she's listening, but love all the people jumping in, making comments and supporting us. So so it's like, I think for me, one thing I try to do in the morning, and our goal with Brighton is to try to set that tone. It's not your time on the Brighton app, it's your timing of the Brighton app. And if we can get people in the habit in the morning, adults and young adults, that the first first 15 minutes is sacred. I mean, it sets the tone for the rest of your day. And if you get up and the first thing you do is start going down rabbit holes, or, you know what it's like when you have an argument with your mom or dad before you go to school, or your brother, let's say, your sister, it sets the tone for the rest of the day. You go to school agitated, a little irritated, but if you get up and you have a really good, beautiful moment, maybe a good conversation with someone on the bus on the way to school or something. I'm just trying to put this in terms of what you do early, where your attention goes, is where your energy is going to flow the rest of the day. Do you guys believe that?
Yeah, I totally agree.
Jeff, that brings up a point that I was thinking as you all were talking, and that's about being intentional. Whether it is, it's one thing to, if you get sucked into something and then realize that your time is being wasted, versus if you're intentionally going to read the news, for example, because that's something you're interested in, if that's because you're an advocate for something, or if you're taking that time on Brighton or doing something else meditation wise or whatever it is in the morning, but carry that out throughout. And I think what a lot of young people do, and I see this with my own kids as well, and myself plenty of times, is doing things for the sake of doing things without understanding the why, and tying into the meaning and purpose is being intentional with the actions. And it doesn't have to always be some grand meaning and purpose. It can just be like, why am I doing this particular thing right now? And is it serving me? Is it lifting you up, as you mentioned before, or is it just wasting precious moments sometimes,
Yeah. Well, I was going to say that what I've started practicing for myself, and it's really made a difference on how I start my day, is I do go and get coffee every morning at the Barnes and Noble down here. And I always make it a point to have a conversation with the person behind who's making my coffee. So we always have this great conversation. There's a Vietnam veteran who I just met yesterday, Roy, and I bought him his coffee yesterday. I'm super grateful. And I always try to do a random act of kindness throughout my, I try to do it in the beginning of my day. And then today I saw him and he was like, "Oh, I remember you. Thank you so much." And then I was talking to the other person, and I love starting my day that way. I purposely do that. So I'm very intentional about let me do something nice, because guess what? That someone else is going to be grateful. And then it's going to, it's like that, just ripple effect. So I'm very intentional about how I show up in the world early in the morning. And then it seems to carry out, throughout my day. So I try to do that.
Raquel, it's that whole word reciprocity. You do something for somebody and there's that ripple effect, and people, then the expectation is sometimes it's just subconscious, is you feel like, okay, now I want to go do something good for somebody. And, everybody is going through something. I mean, everybody, it's just 100% guaranteed. You live long enough, you're going to have something happen in your event in your life. And so it's how you reframe it and look at it as, do events happen to you or do they happen for you? And that's something I've said for a long time. Are you a victim or a victor? And that really goes into meaning and purpose. I think the more you believe you're a victim, the more things happen to you, the more the world's conspiring against you. It's going to be very, very hard to find meaning and purpose.
I have just a brief question. Riley and Saraya. So what initiatives are going on right now, in your worlds, that are giving that meaning and purpose? So we have Pay It Forward. So when you go to a Tim Hortons here, you buy the coffee for the people behind us, there's a bunch of them. What are the big ones right now, Riley, in your world that you guys do to create that more meaning and purpose in life?
That's a really good question. I was sitting here and kind of thinking about that. Ironically, I would say there's not any super big like pushes or initiatives. When I was reflecting on like what I like to do, I think it's like littler things. Like I like to make sure if I'm riding up in the elevator with someone, I strike up a conversation, or if I see someone in the hallway, I make sure to acknowledge them. And so that kind of made me think of a question, is that like when you're short on time, like what is everyone's go-to quick acts of kindness that can be done easily, that maybe don't cost money, or maybe they do, like just some ideas that everyone has tried out in the past.
Saraya, what about you? What's going on in your world that, you know, kind of like that pay it forward, or like that you help each other out for your group?
Sure. Personally, just little things that bring me joy. I love anything DIY, anything arts and crafty, right? And I love to give gifts. So I love to create things for the people in my life that I love. Whether it's I've got some clay Christmas ornaments on the docket for my boyfriend's mother, right? That kind of thing. Like I just like to make little things for people. So that's something that, first of all, keeps me busy, brings me joy, and that excuse me, also shares that joy. But yeah, in general, it's usually just small acts of service, and spending time with people for me is a big way for me to show them that I care.
I have a question. So for the young ladies, my thing is, I find that a lot of the youth think that they are supposed to know what their purpose is in a very young
Yeah.
age.
Yeah.
And it's like hard to remind our youth that it's the experiences, it's the life events that are going to, you know, just like Lucas said and like Jeff said, that, you know, you kind of find your purpose and your meaning. And so my thing is, how as adults, like, how are we supposed to kind of still carry that message to all of you? Because I feel like, I mean, you can tell me, I feel like there's a lot of frustration in our youth because they feel the pressure of having to know that. So I'm just curious, like, what do you hear? Like, what are people saying about that? And how can we kind of help all of you understand that it takes some time? I'm 48 and I just found it like 2 years ago. So
I think, go ahead.
You both
Go
started
ahead,
exactly the same
We
way.
do.
That was
Yeah.
beautiful. You both are thinking.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Coming out of high school, and like, so I'm a freshman, and so last year, senior was a big question, like, what are you doing next year? That's obviously a big purpose question. And so this is obviously a very specific context, but framing the question of more like, what are you excited to do next year? Not like a achievement goal, but maybe attaching more emotion to it. Like, I would love to tell you what I'm excited about and that I really enjoy doing versus, oh yeah, I'm going to Iowa. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
okay.
Well, so I've got a question here, folks, from one of our great people here. Mark Reed is one of our friends that has followed us for a long time here. And he says, for the younger two ladies, do you worry about getting older? And for the rest of you, you old farts. And I am ad-libbing slightly, but I'm counting myself in there. For the rest of you, do you wish you'd be 25 again? Saraya, maybe you can start off with that one. What does that look like for you as you're getting older and so old, right? It's terrible. But it's the inevitability. And what does that look like? How do we embrace that?
Sure. Well, I am 25, and I feel like I've kind of gone through what I've been calling a quarter life crisis this year. And I think, geez, I do worry about getting old, but I don't think for the reasons you would suspect. I think for me, a lot of the, you know, quote unquote, like adult milestones that we in our culture, in our Western culture, attribute with adulthood have been like really hard for, I think, a lot of people my age to achieve, right? I'm still a renter and I have a really good job. I've had a really good job for years. That doesn't matter, right? You know, I live in Memphis and like homes here are like $200,000, $300,000 for like a starter home. So like, I think some of those things that are like, you know, those traditional barriers to adulthood have just been harder to reach. And And so, yeah, I worry about getting old. I'm like, am I going to be able to, if I have kids someday, am I going to be able to like have a nice home for them? Am I going to be living paycheck to paycheck if I have kids someday? Like, so I'm kind of getting to a point where those decisions need to be made. And that's scary. So I've just been taking it one day at a time, and therapy helps.
You're gonna have to catch us on the financial stuff later. Maybe.
Well, I was just going to say that's why we have this topic and why Brighton has health, wealth, and purpose. So we have the wealth aspect because the largest stressor for older Gen Z is financial insecurity, but we don't talk about in context of meaning and purpose and diet and exercise. And so, yeah, there's a reason why this show is trying to incorporate all these different topics on optimizing mental health, mental wellness, so far, I just love this conversation. This has been a great way to kick off the show.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. So going out, we got about 4 or 5
Riley
minutes
wanted
left
to get
here.
older because she's a freshman in college.
Yeah,
so
let's hear if Riley wants to get older.
I want to hear.
I think ironically in high school, and yes, now that I'm in college, no. I'm like, you want me to, I loved high school. I realized I had it made. Like I had freedom, but then I was not having to pay bills and all that stuff. So yeah, I'm a mixed bag. I see it both ways. I'm just kind of going day by day. I think it's important to just focus on the day or week, and a little bit later you can think big picture.
As you should be in the present. Focus on the present.
Yeah, we talk so much about living in the moment, and being present, and anxiety is an emotion for the future, and depression, sadness is an emotion for the past. So one of the reasons why we're so anxious and depressed is that we live in the past and the future so much, and we don't live in the present. So again, I think there's something about your generation that's pulling at us older people, that we can say, yeah, you know what? You guys have told us that the number one stressor for older Gen Z is mental health overall. I mean, that's the number one New Year's resolution, that we need to build the processes and the systems to support you guys, to give you the ability to crack that door and then kind of get the heck out of your way. Lucas, I'll let you kind of tie this up as we move into the next session topic, but what are your thoughts again on some of the things we've talked about today, or what do you want to add about Inovia and how you guys are on the forefront of this?
Sure. Good question. But I think a lot of that comes back to finding connection, and as Riley was talking about before, what are some of the small things that you can do? And some of that is just acknowledgement. People want to feel seen. We want to feel heard. We want to know that we matter, that we exist, that we're not alone, that our experiences are not unique, that there's other people who might have the same struggles or the same challenges and triumphs and want to share these. So I think connection is a huge piece. And that's again, one of the reasons why we exist. That's why this show is happening. And I think through those connections, we do find more meaning and purpose, and we have greater understanding. And a lot of times that has to start with an awareness of, as you mentioned, the past and the present and the future too, of where things are now. And then if we want to build out goals and moving forward to, something to look forward to, then great, we can do that. And it doesn't have to be alone. There's lots of beautiful people out there to do that with.
Yeah. And meaning and purpose isn't a destination. Right. It's a process. You never get there. It's a process. You're always trying to better yourself. And I think if we think of like a reductionist mindset, like, oh, we're going to achieve purpose someday. Now you become enlightened possibly, but it's a process, So I just want to remind people that, especially younger people, that it just doesn't show up one day knocking on your door and say, oh, here you go. Here's your purpose. It's like, you may not figure it out. It took me age, 50 basically. And I probably maybe even haven't figured it out yet. I've got a lot of good years.
Would you be 25 again?
Wow, that's a good question.
That's a good one.
I honestly,
25 with the knowledge you have now.
Well, with the knowledge I have now, of course. But
right?
going back, I don't know. I'm happy. I'm happy with my life. I'm happy where I'm at. Can
I ask like one quick like just for either Soraya or Riley really quickly, because when you say that the New Year's resolution is good mental health, I want to know what that means, because people can think good mental health means you're happy all the time. That's not realistic. So I'm curious what that means to them.
Why don't we have Soraya take that? Because we have about a minute left, I think. And then we got to get going to the commercial.
Sure. To me, I think of, having good coping skills, right? Having things to do when you're feeling overwhelmed. I think it's having social capital, having people in your life that you can depend on, having community in your life. And I think nutrition and wellness are a big part of it too, that often get neglected. But yeah, to me, I really picture that holistic wellness aspect, right? I don't think there's any one part that can do well without everything working cohesively.
Awesome answer.
Good answer.
Yeah.
Well, I think on that, folks, if we're all ready, James, why don't you take it away with one of our sponsors? Again, a fantastic panel discussion. Thank you so much for joining us for this section. We're going to be moving on to the next one. James, take it away, pal.
Gen Z is the most anxious, depressed, and lost generation of all time. Yet they had as their number one New Year's resolution, good mental health, which is very encouraging. I have a saying that I live by: purpose becomes passion when it gets personal. And for me, this is extremely personal. We lost our oldest son, Seth, to fentanyl poisoning at the age of 23. And that was soon followed by my lovely wife, Prudence, who lost her life to alcoholism due to the grief of losing a child. It's time to draw a line in the sand. It's time to make a difference. It's time to improve lives. We're super excited about the launch of our first Gen Z mental wellness app, Brighten. To find out more, you can reach us at brightenyourlife.com. That's BRIGHTN, yourlife.com.
And that, folks,
and welcome
take
back.
A look at that QR code. That'll take you right to the Brighten app. Again, one of our fantastic brought to you buys for this great event. And I want to introduce our next panel. James, why don't you take it away, pal?
There we go. I'll tell you right now, when I first met Jeffrey, his amazing Brighten app, I was so impressed. An app designed to empower young adults. It was incredible. The whole thought of an app that young adults could take and they could really make their own mental health guide, I think it's a beautiful thing, and I think you really should check it out. Our next panel, we're going to be talking about healthy lifestyle choices in social media. And when I think of healthy lifestyle choices, I think of mind, body, and soul, which I'm a big component about. And then social media, I'm sure they could tell you a lot more about it than I can. We have a few amazing guests coming in. There's Dr. Carrie from the Scanlon Center of School of Mental Health. We have Emir O'Donnell, the founder. She's not in right now, but I will put her in. Emir O'Donnell, the founder of Teen Reconnect. Ashley Grimes, the interim executive director of NAMI Florida. Myas, the hidden opponent. And Riley, of course, who was just on the last episode from the University of Iowa, Strike Out the Stigma. Riley, you were there already. Why don't you give us a brief little introduction of who you are, what you do, 1 minute, and then we'll move on to the next person.
Yeah, so like you said, I'm Riley. I'm a freshman at the University of Iowa. I helped a lot with Strike Out the Stigma, which is a mental health baseball and softball tournament surrounding like brain health, which helped me win the 2023 Student Influencer of the Year award for the state of Iowa. And then it also gave me the opportunity to help create content for Brighten, which kind of like we said, I recommend checking out. It's a really cool way to hit 3 really big, important buckets and improve your well-being overall.
That's excellent. Maya, why don't you give us a little bit of who you are, what you do, and about a minute.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mia Swenson. I am a sophomore at Fairfield University, and I work with the Hidden Opponent, which is a student-athlete mental health awareness advocacy group. So we have campus captains on chapters all across the nation and internationally, both at high schools and colleges. And my primary role the past 2 years has been being a head campus captain in the leadership role for our high school campus captains.
Amazing. Dr. Carrie, how about you give us a little bit of who you are, what you do, and about a minute.
Hi, yeah, so I actually am a teacher. I will always refer to myself as a teacher. I was an elementary school teacher for about 10 years and then went on and got my master's and PhD. And my focus was social emotional behavioral health. And right now I'm working as the director of professional development for the Scanlon Center for School Mental Health and the Baker Teacher Leaders Center and the College of Education at the University of Iowa. And I'm also a clinical associate professor in teaching and learning there, and spend most of my days working with school districts across the state of Iowa and now even beyond the state of Iowa, helping them create unique school mental health professional development training opportunities for educators and community members.
Wow, that is incredible. So important. Emir, how about you give us a little bit of that Irish brogue that you have that rolls off your tongue? You remind me of the East Coast. Go ahead, tell us who you are, what you do, a little bit.
Well, first of all, I want to say I'm absolutely delighted to be here and to be part of this amazing initiative. So Emer O'Donnell is my name. I have a background in psychology. I'm also a behavioral change coach. And I founded a business called Teen Reconnect because I think connection, as Lucas talked about in the earlier session, is phenomenally important to all of us. And I've also have developed something that's called the Q Pathfinder, which I think it's very difficult for a lot of young people at the moment. They can feel overwhelmed about who they are and trying to figure out who they are. And if we don't know who we are, we can't figure out what sort of life we want or discover the life that we will love. And actually, the chances of you having the same behavioral preference map as anyone else is 1 in a quintillion, which is a billion, which is more than there are people on the planet. And so for me, that begs the question, why would you ever want to be anyone else apart from yourself? Because there's no one else just like you. So that's really what my work is about. It's empowering young people to understand their uniqueness, the fact that they're filled to the brim with talents and strengths. And I love it when that life
important.
comes back.
I'm sorry to cut you off there. It is so important to understand that we all have that uniqueness that we bring and that we all have that special, and we should hold on to that. That's our spark. That keeps us on a straight and narrow the whole time. But I want to bring in Ashley. Ashley is like I said, the interim executive director, her new position that she just got. She was formerly the president of, I'm going to say it wrong, I'm so sorry, Ashley, NAMI, Florida?
NAMI, Florida.
NAMI, Florida. Go ahead.
So I've heard a lot of people talk about their purpose. And for me, my purpose is I lost my best friend to suicide. And that's what made me find recovery after I, tried to take my own life. And so, I was looking for purpose and meaning in my life, and I found recovery community organizations, and then I found NAMI, the largest grassroots mental health organization in the nation. We have 49 state organizations, 650 affiliate organizations. In Florida, we have 24 affiliates. And what we do is we advocate, educate, and we support people with mental health conditions. And so that's what I do every day is I support people so they don't end up in the same situation my best friend did or that I did.
Thank you so much for your what you do and everything you've done for other people. It sounds like all of you have done a lot of incredible work to help other people. I kind of want to lead into healthy lifestyle choices first, and then you guys can switch into social media. So let's have a good discussion. What is healthy lifestyle choices? As young people like Riley and Maya and Ashley, do you lean into it's more important to have that structured food, or is it more important to be healthy, or is it more important to have a balance of all these?
I'm a big proponent of listening to your body, whether that be listening to your body in terms of intuitive eating, listening to your body in terms of exercise. And by that, sometimes it's listening that maybe you don't want to exercise because you're comfy in your bed, not because you don't want to go out and work out. And trying to be in tune with your feelings and know when you're putting it off because you're being lazy or when you're putting it off because you really need a rest day. And I think that's true for all of mind, body, and soul. And that's how I kind of see healthy lifestyle choices for me.
I think she summed it up perfectly.
I love that you called me a young person. I'm 38, but I think moderation for me is what's, healthy is, if you have, I'm diabetic, so I have to watch, my sugar intake. But if I think and do something in moderation and don't eat a whole cake, it might be okay. If I want to work out, I've had those times in my life where I worked out for 6 hours. That's not healthy. So moderation, I feel like, is the healthy, way to live.
Right.
So if I can add here, for me, actually, healthy lifestyle choices starts with relationships. And it starts with that relationship with yourself and also your relationship with other people. Because when they go AWOL, what do we tend to go for? All the comforts. So it can be the junk food. It can be, I'm going to stay in bed today because I just don't feel good enough to get up. It can be, I'm going to have a drink, or I might go and have some drugs. And for me, if we can't understand who we are and what drives us and what we need in our lives in terms of positive relationships, and I think that's why values, understanding our values around those, and also the beliefs that we have around our relationships, if we can start to develop that and develop that self-awareness around that, then we're in a much better position to surround ourselves by people who actually give us positive energy rather than suck us dry. And then actually we're in a better state to go and do all those healthy things that Mia and Ashley and Riley have said. But it starts with relationship.
I would agree with that. I would just build off of that even a little bit more. When I'm doing wellness work with educators and people in the community, then just like what Emma said, I always start with the values. Let's try to identify your top 2 or 3 values, and let's build habits into a system around those values to help you live authentically into those values. That's healthy. And part of that is building healthy relationships with people, with yourself, but with things as well. And that's why when we're talking about health, and Jeff mentioned this before in the first segment, health is not just about what we eat and how we move our bodies. Health is multiple dimensions. In fact, if we're going off of SAMHSA's definition of health, there are 8 dimensions to health, to wellness. And one of them is financial and emotional and intellectual and physical and occupational, environmental. And when you start to build healthy relationships with all of those dimensions, then you can live authentically into a state of well-being.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that for, our discussion here today, I think there's also a big one that everyone's missing here as well is also like your personal sexuality. This is something that society of today is very much more open than we were 25, 35, 45 years ago, and what that means, and making those healthy decisions around that and what relationships look like. And I think I'm going to bring this back into the social media aspect, where social media now is just a proliferation. It's a word I'm really liking tonight, but it's a proliferation of, these images and these, all the available apps that are just out there constantly driving a certain personality type and a mantra, I'm going to call it. But how do you folks, and we'll start with the young folks here and we'll lead into Dr. Kari and Emma, but how is the dating world on apps? How is social media on apps? How is that changing the way that you interact? And I'm trying to put in a context of something you can relate to. Your parents. That's a relationship that you folks have saw. How does that change now with the social media generation that we're in right now?
I can go first. So I'm not familiar with like dating apps. I'm only 19. I'm still going to try and find whoever I date in person for right now. But I think there are a lot more LGBTQ plus role models out there right now. Specifically, I'm thinking of Julia and Camilla on TikTok. They're this like Norwegian couple. They just had a baby boy, and they're lesbian. And it's such a great role model, I think, for a lot of LGBTQ youth. And I think that's something that is one of the positive sides of social media that not a lot of people talk about. And I think you're able to relate with people. You're able to connect with that community across the whole world, which wasn't able to be done before when there wasn't as much social media presence.
Yeah, I would say that that's definitely a big positive and really cool experience. And then there's obviously also the other side where there's almost a very in your face expectation of what relationships should look like, even if they're not always super correct. So it's important to be able to understand like what a healthy relationship actually looks like, and know when maybe you're not in one, or things you can do to make relationships more healthy, whether it's with a partner or even just like with friends and parents, just everyone surrounding yourself.
As the old
Yeah.
person, I can say I met my ex-husband on social media. I don't know if anyone remembers MySpace, and they had that cool new member. My ex-husband was the cool new member, and we were married for 10 years, and we have two beautiful daughters. He was from Texas, I was from Florida. We would have never met each other if social media didn't exist. Now, life got in the way, but that wasn't social media that got in the way. So there is beautiful things and relationships that can come out of social media, in my opinion.
Right.
What are what are you like? What are the things as a young person? Because you guys are why we're here. What are the things we should be looking for? Like, what are the things that we should be worried about? What, like, it is so easy to go down a rabbit hole and start believing things are true, like body image, that everyone is beautiful but me, that all my friends are having so much fun and I'm not. So like that's kind of what I avoid when I look at my friends and what they're doing. I'm like, yeah, that was for like Saturday between 2 and 4. That's not their whole life. What kind of things are you guys like kind of decoding as you're taking this information in so it doesn't impact you negatively?
I would say I try to take it all as inspiration instead of a comparison thing. I am a habitual screenshotter. I have an album in my phone, just like of screenshots of outfits and different, like, just related to like vibes and stuff. And so I have kind of tried to create a mindset where it's more just about using people's like, scenarios as inspiration, not something to compare myself to. I think that's really helped make it so social media is more of a positive lens for me when I go on it compared to something negative.
So here's a question
For
from
me-
Mark, another one of our friends from the house.
I think just one sec, Pat. I'm sorry. I think Maya had something to comment on that.
Mia.
Sorry, I was just going to say that I take social media with a grain of salt, and I try and find people to follow that bring me value in life and bring me joy in life. So if it's going to be one of those things where I'm constantly worried that I'm being left out or excluded because I'm always seeing someone on social media, honestly, I'll just unfollow them. It's not good for me. I need to be very cognizant and mindful of who I'm following on social media and friends with.
That is like what we were talking about last time, where we were talking about our people around us. Like, as I got older, I'm 53 now. When I was 20, everyone was let in. It was like a big floodgate. But now I have a gate. And if you're not bringing me, if you're bringing me down or dragging me back, or when I want to go work out, you're like, hey, let's go get a burger instead. I don't have time for you anymore. I want the people who prop me up. And my social media is more like that now, just like you're saying, Maya. That is very wise of you to like, I'm just not going to engage. I'm sorry, Pat, I interrupted you. Hop in there and tell us what you're.
Well, the question was about marriage, and this next generation about relationships and what that looks like. Is marriage something that's antiquated? Are we going to see that a resurgence as we're seeing 50% divorce rates, and how does that kind of weigh into your decision making about partnerships and who you're getting involved with? And again, I do believe that goes back to the social media stuff. What's real? What's not real? How do you progress in a relationship if you're in this world of make-believe? Kind of like what Maya was saying, is that you have to take a lot of it with a grain of salt. But what does marriage look like? What do those relationships look like now for your folks' generation?
I think a lot of people that I talk to in general are really focused on, I need to be stable financially. I need to be where I want to be around the country. I need to be done with like school, whether that be undergrad, grad school, etc., before I really think about marriage. But I think on the dating side, life's short. We need to enjoy relationships with other people as much as possible. And I think like 3 years is what I've heard of, like, oh, you're not engaged after 3 years. That's kind of like the vibe right now from what I'm seeing. I don't know. What about you, Riley? What do you think?
we're just kind of week by week right now. I wouldn't say marriage seems kind of like a scary thing to a lot of my friends when I've talked about it. Like that's not a right now thing. So I don't have a ton of like input or knowledge to go off of, but I kind of feel like what you said is pretty accurate.
For me, it was like soon as I left college, that was the first question I asked: when you getting married? When you get married? As soon as I got married, when you having kids? When you having kids? When you buying a house? When you? It was like there was a constant timeline. It was never good enough. Is that the pressures that you guys are facing too? Like, are there people, like especially the older generation, around you with these expectations, and how do you handle that? What's the best way to handle that?
Luckily for me, so I know there were a lot of social media things around Thanksgiving, and it was like, oh, going home to your family and being asked like, where's the boyfriend? Where's the girlfriend? All that stuff. I luckily didn't have that experience because my family is different and they just aren't as concerned about that. But I think it's definitely something that's showing up on a lot of youth mind right now because they might have different goals and priorities, and getting married might be up there, but it might not be above like graduating grad school or being financially stable. So hearing that from old folks, I understand that's how their generation was, but sometimes it can be harmful.
I'll just take
triggered.
the knife out of my back.
Yeah.
Those old folks.
Oh,
Terrible. Dr. Kari,
Go
can
get
you
my walker.
touch base a little bit about what you see as an educator dealing with this next generation and how some of the problems, some of the trials, but also some of the triumphs that you see with that as well?
Are you asking specifically about marriage, or are you asking about social media?
Well, a bit of both. I think that they're not so distantly related. I think relationships now are different, right? We have relationship coaches on every platform every day that can give you dating advice, relationship advice, how to start a YouTube channel. Who knows what they're giving you advice on? But that has context and it has rationale, but it also has impact. And what I'm asking is that you as an educator, you have to wrap that around and put it in a profile for your individuals that you see every day. You see hundreds and thousands of children in this generation. What are you seeing?
Yeah. Well, I always fall back on research. So I actually just had a conversation with one of our nation's top researchers on this topic. Her name is Jackie Nisi, Dr. Jackie Nisi. She's a professor at Brown University. And, if you're looking at data, then the ladies are absolutely spot on. So there are elements of social media that are actually a saving grace for certain populations of our young folk. And typically those are minoritized populations. And so we're seeing some really positives with social media in terms of finding connection and relationship, particularly when you identify with a minoritized population. When it becomes really harmful is when you start to notice that you are not spending time doing things outside of social media. So when you are not spending enough time moving your body during the day, actively moving your body, when you're not spending enough time, engaging face-to-face with family members or with your own friends, you're not spending enough time outside in the outdoors, if you're not spending, so on and so forth, right? If it is constantly interfering with all of these different really important elements of your life, it's too much and it's probably negative. The other thing is this: if you're struggling with anxiety outside of social media, you better be very well aware that you're going to struggle with it inside social media too. So you really have to know yourself before you start to engage on different platforms. If you know that you are a person who experiences depression, then probably getting on platforms and getting sucked down into rabbit holes that only talk about depression, it's not going to be very good for you. You're just going to get sucked in even further, right? So before you start to, spend a lot of time on different platforms and it really doesn't even matter at what point in time in the day, you really have to know yourself and set limitations and boundaries based on your own individual areas of strength or areas of growth.
So how
But I think both of you ladies said that.
How does that hit home for you folks? Like when you hear somebody who's talking with the data, she's relaying those facts, how does that relate into your daily lives and the people that you see around you? Is there someone in your friend group, Helen, that is just like, she knows everything the Kardashians do and she knows what everyone's wearing this week? Like, Is that healthy? How is that affecting their relationships? What can you guys speak to on that?
I think I got really lucky with my friends being. Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, go for it.
I got really lucky with my friends being mindful of social media usage. However, there are definitely people who you're talking to and they're just looking down at their phones, constantly scrolling. And we all get into like the doom scrolling habit, just like Dr. Carey mentioned. However, I think we're all kind of pushing each other to be better and be mindful about what media we're consuming and how much we're consuming.
I think that's very fair. Like, and I think it brings up a good point that like kind of relationships has been the theme almost of this, and that we're all kind of each other's accountability partners. So I know that I have friends that, I mean, it's a duh thing, but you don't realize it. Like when you're feeling anxious outside and you go back to social media, like you said, that has a big impact. So I have some friends that I might just go talk to, like, hey, I learned this tonight. Like, what do you think about this? So having those conversations within those relationships is really important, I think.
I agree. I think moderation is like I said before, moderation's the key to life. But I have a question. I don't know if I can ask it, but about
Absolutely.
bullying. In real life, there's a lot of bullying, but I've heard on social media there's a lot of empathy and kindness. Have you seen people stand up for people more on social media than they do in real life? Or do you feel like they bully more on social media than they do in real life?
So
for
me, you go ahead. Yeah.
Are you sure? Okay.
Absolutely.
I think it's a mix of both. So I think the anonymous, however, how you could be anonymous gets tricky because it's easier to bully people and be bullied by anonymous people. But I also think that more people are reflecting and being like, I should stand up for this person. And I think that anonymity is helpful in that way as well. So I think I see a lot of it's easier to bully people or be bullied, and it's also easier to stand up. And I think people kind of create that community of like, I was bullied, but I'm going to stand up for this person. That's what I've seen.
So there's just one thing I wanted to add is that I think it's really interesting social media now, because I think sometimes it depends on the age of the teen and how young they're introduced to it, because we become what we feed our brains, you know. What stories do we tell ourselves? What stories do we hear? What stories do we believe? And I suppose what I feel within my community and the people I work with, and other people that work with me, is the idea of what AI can do now in terms of images that show up. I saw an image the other day of beautiful women, which were fake, completely and utter fake. And if that's being held up as the ideal for women to have to strive towards, it's just such a false hope. And, you know, we're talking about, you know, healthy lifestyles. Well, it's almost like something that it's a utopia that we shouldn't even be feeling the need to have to strive for. And so for me, that's really important, because whoever manages the media and the stories that they feed us, they're the ones that control the narrative. And so having the skills of being able to figure out the truth from fiction, I think, is so important for this generation and the generation coming through. And I'm really interested to know, do you guys have dialogue around that?
I think for sure. There's a lot of TikTok videos of like, oh, you can see how this like little picture's warped. She definitely used some sort of body image alteration picture type thing. And I think a lot more, the people I follow in particular are very open about not doing that. So specifically Victoria Garrick Brown, who founded The Hidden Opponent, she does these things called like Real Post, where she shows like, oh, I look great, but like in this angle, I look different, and it's okay to look different in different angles. So I think that goes back to the healthy relationships with social media, where you're choosing to consume the media that's going to lift you up and that's going to be relatable to you.
Yeah, I think it's so important just to I know we talk about women and the way they look at themselves and how social media and media portrays them, but it is also a thing for men, but we don't talk about it. Like, I suffered from it a lot. I was a fat man. I was a fat child. And all of the people in social media, in TV back then, if you were chubby, you were comic relief, you were the fool, you fell off the horse, you broke the horse's back, ha 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 ha. The only heroes were like fit, champion, and I think that's still similar now. Like the people on social media that do really well, if you're male, are the people that are fit. Same with women and men. If you look at the ones that have the big numbers, they have a lot. They just have that look that everyone seems to want to achieve for whatever reason. Now, why do you think that is? Like, all of us, really we have different tastes in people. Why do we pick certain people and prop them up? Why do you think we choose on beauty instead of on content sometimes? Riley? Putting you on the spot.
Yeah. This is really interesting. So like I said, I'm a freshman, so I have a class that's kind of talked about this.
Yeah.
But class scientific reason. I just personally, I feel like sometimes when you get sucked into social media rabbit holes, that is just what you're being feeded and you're seeing every day. And so as much as it's hard, kind of Maya was saying, it's important to get out of those and unfollow and try to get away from that, because when you're constantly seeing it, it's just kind of warping your perception of what you perceive to be healthy lifestyles and kind of the utopia version of it.
Maya, what do you think?
Yeah, so I think, Riley, what you said is, I definitely agree with everything. And also I feel like the societal ideal right now is a skinny white girl or boy. And so that's what typically gets favored on social media. And I think I'm going to beat the dead horse, but that's why it's super, super important for you to choose who you're following, because there's not going to be this grand change right now. It just isn't. Honestly, I'm not sure it's realistic right now for us to be dismantling the whole societal ideation of skinny people. But the way you can change and do your part is I follow people who look like me, whose body types I can relate to, and that fills my cup. That is valuable to me. So I think that's super important thing to be cognizant of and aware of when you're consuming media.
I think we're also sometimes sheep. We just believe what everybody says. I mean, back in the day, people that were overweight were thought about as wealthy because they were able to eat more. And I think sometimes we listen to what everyone else says, what we should like, instead of thinking about what we really do like.
Yeah, I think that's so true. It's so important. But so what about, I'm sorry to say this, a little bit older, 10 years older. What about you ladies? How are you finding the social media for our age? I still see it as similar. It's the people that look perfection have the big numbers, and the people that, so I tend to follow the ones that I think are funny or they do some interesting stuff rather than that. But I notice their numbers are lower, and the people that have that goddess kind of look are higher. Are you guys finding that, Amir? I'm sorry, I'm saying your name wrong.
I can't. I don't know if you can. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but
okay.
That's
for some
okay.
reason,
Go ahead.
You can't. I'm not moving on the screen.
That's right.
I think actually I try and spend as less time on social media as possible. And the reason is while I'm spending my life watching other people's creations, I'm not creating myself. And I think we're all creative beings. And so I sometimes I go on TikTok and think I'll never get that half hour back. And I feel I'm here with a purpose. I'm here to create something. And if I can share my knowledge, I'm happy to do that. So, over the summer, I wrote a book. And if I'd spent my time on social media, I may not have. So I guess, and for also me, back to that healthy lifestyle choice, being out, moving, being in the fresh air is really important to me. And it also helps me be creative. And, we sit a lot, we're quite sedentary, with our work. I do a lot of virtual work. And so for that reason, the less I'm on it, the better, to be honest. And that might be a generational thing. I like to have a conversation. I like to engage with people as much as I can face to face. And I like to be grounded in what I would see as reality as much as possible. And it's not to say that I'm not interested in the world, but yeah. That's where I'm coming from on that one.
For
And
sure.
I also have 2 small children, so I try not to be on social media much, because actually that's not a habit that I want them to have.
Right. Doctor, if we can get you to kind of give a little bit of feedback before we end up here. I think we've lost Emmer's connection here. Doctor, maybe you can tell people about what you folks are doing at the University of Iowa with the Scanlon organization, and how you're helping individuals. And we'll wrap up on that and get ready for our next segment.
Yeah, sure. So the Scanlon Center for School Mental Health is a center that is housed in the College of Education at the University of Iowa. And our charge is really to work with school districts across the state of Iowa, and to really work directly with teachers in strengthening their mental health literacy and skill development. We do other things as well. There's a clinic that also can do some short-term clinical work with students and with educators until they can get in to see more long-term care, because we know that wait list is super, super long. So we do that. And then we have a research arm as well that works really, really closely with my arm of the center, the PD arm, so that we can track the effectiveness of all of the interventions that we're using within school systems to, once again, build mental health literacy and to build various supports for students, families, and teachers in schools.
Great. And again, folks, when we talk about the youth and what's coming up next in our generation's lives, social media, we would be remiss to not bring it up. This is such an interesting and deep topic. We could go on for hours, but we've only got 2 more hours. We've only got another hour to go through here. So I want to thank our guests for this panel. James, I know we've got a very special commercial to bring us into our next panel of our guests. I want to thank you folks for joining us tonight, and we will see you again in a few moments after this commercial break.
Have you ever found yourself looking to connect with people who understand what it's like to be you? Do you sometimes feel like you could use some extra support from others who are going through similar experiences in life? These are some of the reasons why Innovia Behavioral Health exists. We offer our members unlimited access to a wide variety of educational, experiential, and therapeutic support groups that are applicable to you. These are all led by our team of live facilitators around the world, and they fall into 3 main categories of health and wellness, mental health and recovery, and work and personal relationships. We already have platforms for adults in English and in Spanish, and we also have an English platform for our adolescents. Our affordable and accessible services already include hundreds of available groups per month, and we will continue to add more as we keep growing. Our goal is to help everyday people lead happier, healthier lives, and we believe that everyone deserves a little bit of extra support. Join us today at InnoviaBH.com. That is INNOVIABH.com.
There are so many great people and great sponsors bringing this show to you. I am amazed by all the talented young people and how wise they were. Those last 2, Riley and Maya, oh my God, the wisdom that they have brought. I learned a lot about the social media and how I should react to social media. Just delete people I shouldn't follow. I love that. Now we're moving into the topic that's near and dear to my heart. I suffered from addictions, but my addictions were different, and not everyone categorizes that. I suffered from food addiction. So when I was depressed, when I was anxious, when I was angry, basically if it's an emotion, I ate and I ate and ate and ate. So this is such an important thing, because usually when we suffer from this mental health crisis that we're going to, we reach for those addictions and substances. So we're going to talk about that right now. We have some great guests, some of which we've already met. So I may avoid those right now, but Jacob, you're a college student. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Give us the 1-minute pitch, and then we'll move on.
All right. You hear me all right? Am I good?
Absolutely. You're
All right.
great.
Sweet. So I'm Jacob Spicer. I'm a college student at Augustana College in Rock Island, Illinois. I'm a philosophy major and a psychology minor, and I'm friends with Jeff. My dad and Jeff are very, very good friends from a long time ago, very, very long time ago, and
Come on now, be nice, Jacob.
Shots fired. Ow.
So yeah, and I'm good friends with Ian too, his son. So that's me.
Thank you so much, Jacob. I really appreciate it. Ryan Hampton, he's the founder of Mobilize Recovery. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and what Mobilize Recovery is?
Sure, it's great to be here. Good to see everybody. Hey, Jeff.
Hey, Ryan, love you, man.
In tonight from Charlottesville, Virginia, where I'm out here working on some recovery advocacy projects. So I'm Ryan Hampton. I'm an author, advocate, dog lover, husband, family member, a community member, voter. Most importantly to me, a person in long-term recovery from addiction since February 2nd, 2015. I'm also the founder, as you mentioned, of a national nonprofit organization called Mobilize Recovery. Mobilize Recovery is dedicated to lifting up and advocating for the voices of those who are directly impacted by substance use disorder, people in and seeking recovery, and family members. We work on building capacity, building communities, and building advocacy strategies to curb what I believe is our nation's #1 public health crisis right there with mental health, which is addiction, recovery, and ending overdose.
Mm-hmm. I love that you add family members and friends and stuff like that, the outside circle, because they often don't know how to do what to do or how to do, and they often will make it worse, which leads us to Pat Moore. Pat Moore, he has something called Prehab. He's the author of the book called Prehab. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the book you wrote and who you are, Pat?
Sure. Thank you very much. Glad to be here. Thanks, Jeff, for inviting me for this. Been looking forward to it. Prehab, yes. Why wait for rehab? That's kind of the conclusion I finally came to. Do we know enough now to actually identify and intervene on addiction? And it turns out we do. I found that when I show students an empowerment model, they can start making choices to reduce dependence and develop more autonomy. And that's kind of a trap that nobody sees, but I stumbled on it while working with 5,000 students at Kennesaw State University down here in Georgia. I'm in South Carolina now. So that's what I do. That's my purpose now. How many people can I identify and intervene on? And like the families y'all were just talking about, show them what addiction really is and what they can do about it. And if you want to find out how close you are, I can tell you, I can show you, and you can do something about it. You can be responsible, but you can't be responsible if you can't see what's going on. And it's part of being a human, but we can do something about it.
I love that, Pat. I love that you should check out his book. I love that you're looking at the stuff, the stuff before. It's super important. Jeff?
Yeah, I have a question.
This is your thing. Let's go.
No, I have a question. I'm just so grateful to see everybody here tonight. This is like, this is my dream come true. So I'm very grateful for everybody. But Soraya, I want to ask you a question in regards to one thing that people don't realize, and Ryan and Patrick and I have talked about this a lot, is there's 825 Americans a day that die every day from the diseases of despair, they call it. Overdose, alcohol, and suicide. And it was like 725 last summer, and this year it's 825. So the numbers are getting worse exponentially, but that's a death statistic. The reality is the collateral damage of someone that's fighting these things in the middle of a family is so destructive and so devastating. And you work for young people in recovery. do you want to talk a little bit about, when you have a mom or dad or an older brother and sister that's struggling with substance use distress, what's the impact on a younger child and how devastating and traumatic this can be? I don't think people talk about that a lot. We talk about the people who die, and believe me, I've lost two. But the reality is that the people that live the collateral damage, there's a lot of that.
Yeah, I'm glad you asked this question. That's actually the reason I work for young people in recovery. I was raised by a single mother who is struggling with substance use disorder and has been for my entire life. And so as a kid, some of the things that I am still working through are topics like parentification. I changed a lot of diapers. I helped my sister with her homework. I did things that, I took on responsibilities that I, as a child, really shouldn't have had to take on, right? And I'm still working through that, right? And I think that's something that we don't consider, but it really shapes your entire worldview, right? I mean, that kind of, and I think that often gets lost in the conversation, right? Especially, I love my mom, right? I will always love my mom and I will always love my family, and that will never stop, right? But I think as an ally, sometimes it can be hard to talk about the painful side because I don't want to hurt my mom's feelings. And I don't want to bring stigma, right? I don't want to make the problem worse. But at the same time, we do have to acknowledge that there is some of this collateral damage, especially where the family is concerned, especially where youth is concerned, especially young kids. Like that kind of trauma is something that they're going to have to work through their entire lives as well.
I just have a question. Oh, go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, I'll be super brief. I think, one of the things that there's a misconception about, and I'm coming as a person in recovery here, is that recovery is defined just for people who are in the depths of despair or substance use or a mental health crisis, for the people who are the ones who are experiencing it. And nothing could be further from the truth. Recovery applies to that, that segment of that collateral damage, right? It applies to the family. There's a recovery experience, I think and I think, Jeff, you are a perfect example of that, right? Like you have gone on your own recovery experience as a family member impacted, as a family member of grief. My mother had to go through a very long recovery process and goes through it every single day. My sisters had to learn how to rebuild relationships with me. I think people will often look at what I do today and forget that there was I'm coming up on 9 years shortly. And the first, 3.5 years of my recovery was really rebuilding me, showing up and rebuilding relationships with the family and folks that were left in that collateral damage, but also, those family members and friends and community members going through their own recovery process to rebuild their relationships with me too. It's not just us. I mean, we've talked about this often, that everyone is in recovery from something, but even if it's not a substance, there is mental health trauma, there's physical stresses, there's all sorts of things that the people we had impacted throughout our chaotic use that need to recover from as well.
Mm-hmm.
Very well said. Very well said.
So Jacob, when you hear people talk about, the addictions and how it impacts families, you've known families that have been impacted through addictions, through overdoses, through that sort of thing. What sort of light can you shed on your personal experience of what you've seen and kind of the devastation that comes from that, but also really the light at the end of the tunnel that people can pick up, go back to their families and really try to put those pieces back together?
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's when that kind of thing happens, the immediate response is kind of almost people want to break up and not talk to each other. But eventually with families, and especially with Jeff, I mean, Jeff has been great at turning all that around and doing something with it, and he's a great example for people to look at. And especially so like families, it's a good opportunity for families to be closer, I think. It's a good opportunity for families to talk to each other more and be open about what kind of problems you have, because once you realize that it could be all gone, and it could your time with a family member may disappear. I've had a couple family members that have also on that are my mom's side have killed themselves, and it's very, it's terrible. It's terrible. I saw how it impacted my grandfather. He was a good friend of my grandfather, and but it was also an opportunity for them to come together and remember him, and to talk to each other, and to make a better impact on their family and understand, so
that's well said. That's a lot of wisdom there, Jacob. And again, our families are close. You knew Seth. Guys knew my wife very well. And I think sharing is important. So Patrick, I want to ask you a question, since you're such into the prehab space. For the age of 14 is the age of first use. That's what we hear statistically thrown out. Personally, I think it's younger with vaping. I think that statistic's older. How important is it? And this is probably a dumb question coming from me. Maybe all questions are dumb. How important is it that we get to these kids and we intervene, as you so eloquently say, prior to the intervention? And how do we do that as parents without passing judgment and talking down, condescending to them? How do you do that?
Well, you got to have a definition of addiction. Addiction's it's a misnamed disease. It's really not a disease. It takes many forms over an entire spectrum. So the way our researchers learn about it is not the way we can talk about it to our kids. We have to become more recovery informed. And to me, the simple definition of addiction is mistaking dependence for autonomy. So growing up's not easy for anybody, and we all have to learn about it. Everybody wants to be good at what they do. Everybody wants to excel, and if you find a way that you think you're doing that, but you're really not, and I come along and ask you to give all that up and try harder, and you're already doing 200%, that's not going to be much of a conversation that's going to be useful. So the way I would talk to my kids, and the way I did talk to my kids, was be careful out there. Terrible advice. Guess what? They were careful. They carefully got their first DUI. They carefully experimented with their, they did exactly what I did very carefully. They listened to me. That's not the message. The message is you have to understand what is high benefit and what is low benefit, and what are the ways you can fool yourself, and how do you get into the discipline of not doing that, or recognizing, failure is good if you could recognize it. Yeah. And when I'm taking care of myself in a dependent pattern, I don't recognize it. I have become unteachable, and I will repeat the same things over and over again. That's the kind of relationship, to see through that kind of thing, that kind of pattern. There's no way addiction can, that's the way addiction dies right there. So as soon as whoever it is you're talking to can see the difference between dependence and autonomy and change their pattern towards autonomy, they cannot, everything is, they will continue but changing every day. The other way is the nightmare.
Yeah. Yeah. I just want to pivot for a second. I know Ryan wants to say something, but I was going to ask him a question, but you go first, Ryan. Thanks, Patrick.
Sorry, I have a tendency to do this. These questions are so good, Jeff. So I just, from on the floor experience, right? I believe like the one of the best prevention tools that we have when we're talking specific to kids, it's the kitchen table, right? It's the kitchen table that's in your house. Have those conversations with your kids. And when I say like conversations, I don't mean like, just like Pat was talking about, like, don't do drugs and say no and things like that. But I mean, in my experience, I was struggling as a young person with an extraordinary amount of trauma. you know, in elementary school and middle school and high school around being a gay youth and not being able to talk about it, right? And my parents were afraid to call the question or ask me if anything was going on in my life, or if there was anything that was going on that was bothering me, or if I was being bullied at school. Like, these were things that I think my parents were kind of programmed not to talk about, nor did they want to acknowledge. So we just kind of went along that everything was okay. And that kitchen table that you have at home is probably one of the most effective prevention tools that you can have in that time to have those important, sometimes difficult conversations. The second thing I would say is, you know, we all, I think, are in agreement, you know, with our youth that we're experiencing a catastrophic youth mental health crisis in this country, catastrophic substance use crisis with our country, with our youth in this country. And we have to really look at the societal stressors that are leading our youth into those mental health crisis state, and also chaotic, you know, substance use and experimentation. I was with my niece the other day. I was down in Florida. My niece is 19 years old and lives in Sweden with my sister. And we were having this conversation, and we were talking about school. And I was like, hey, so Kaisa, like, you're getting ready to like think about college, and, you know, she's going to be graduating, and, you know, in like 2 years, where are you going? And she's like, I don't know. And I'm like, what do you mean you don't know? Like, you're like a junior in high school. Like, shouldn't you have this figured out? And she's like, well, in Sweden, like something like, you know, 45% of the students don't go right from high school into college. They actually, some of them take 2 to 3 years to figure out what they actually want to do with their lives. And it made me think, well, here in the United States of America, if you don't go right to college from high school, you're deemed a failure and hopeless, right? Like, I mean, we put so much on these kids in terms of expectations. And then we look at where we're at today and wonder how we got here.
I think Riley or Maya, I can't remember, last session said it best. Us as old people, we should be asking, how are you feeling about it? Not what are you doing, when you're doing, but how are you feeling that the school year is ending? How are you feeling that this is changing for you? How are you feeling about your job? Instead of putting those expectations, they said it like with such great wisdom. I kind of want to hear what Jacob and Sierra have about this, know about this topic. So when I was younger, I had a friend, a really good friend, who got hooked on cocaine, and it kind of like drained him. I saw him physically drained daily, and I had no idea what to do. What can we do in that situation? How can we help a friend that we know is addicted from your perspective? What do you think are the steps we should follow? How about Saraya? We start with you.
Sure. It's a very sensitive situation, right? I would definitely first say to approach the situation without judgment, right? To really go at it from a place of love and concern and well-being, right? And next, I would also I would focus maybe less on, you know, calling them out or making them feel, you know, maybe drawing attention. I would focus less on that and more on being there for that person and giving them a support network, and just being the person that they can come to talk about this, and being the person that they can, you know, explore recovery with, being the person who they know they can trust and that they can lean on. I think that's the most important thing that you can do in that situation, right? Because you don't want to scare them off with some, you know, scary intervention. You don't want to push the idea of recovery on them too hard, because then they're just going to get scared and run away. You don't want to ruin their journey, their recovery journey. That's, you know, so I would say be there and give them some of that social capital to lean on.
Wow, I wish I had the wisdom that you people have. Jacob.
Well, that's why I wanted to get him on the show. Yeah.
Absolutely. Jacob, what do you think? What should we do? How can we help if we're on the outside?
Yeah, well, you know, that one I've always thought about, and one of the things that if I want to go back to a little bit is talking about parents and stuff. I think that one of the things that parents make the mistake on, and I don't want to dog on my parents because they're wonderful.
I'll tell your mom and dad you dogged on them. So
yeah, don't tell them.
I'll text your dad right now.
But no, I mean, getting rid of the taboo is one of the biggest things that I've noticed are with my family, with my friends, is that when you sit down and you go, well, that's just bad, and that's just wrong. And I've seen it with my, with people, I've seen it with a ton of people around me, and they go the way that's bad, because it's, teens want to, they want to rebel. They want we want to rebel. I want to rebel, I'll say that. And when I have friends, I have family members that vape, and that's one of the things that I see a lot around me is people vaping, and I try to sit down. I don't try to make it some sort of disgusting thing like, ew, you vape, like, oh. I just, I might joke around and do that occasionally. But what I do is when I get the opportunity to talk to someone, and I've read a couple of good studies on this, is, vaping is, there's some studies that show the effects. I'll tell them, like, hey, look at this study, the vaping, vaping can affect other people. There is, what is it called, secondhand smoking within vaping, and a lot of people don't know that. There are a lot of studies show that the effect on your lungs is nearly unknown, and it's just beginning to come about. And that's one of the things that I like to bring up. And I just, it's not about me being condescending. It's just me talking to you and saying that, hey, this is what I think. Just do with it as you will, and I'm not going to make it a taboo. I'm not going to shun you. I'm going to just give you some fruit. I'm just going to give you some guidance, and you go with it as you will.
I think there's something about not the content of the information you're giving to somebody, but where it's coming from is so important. And so for Patrick or Ryan, whichever one of you guys want to get this, I probably talked to Patrick or Ryan more about this, but the whole peer-to-peer idea, I mean, if I try to talk to somebody younger, there's those barriers that go up just because I'm older. But if Jacob talks to Soraya, maybe they're going to listen a little bit better. So in regards to addiction and substance use distress, recovery, all that, Patrick, I'll have you go first, and Ryan, you can jump in. Obviously there's a big value for peer-to-peer. It seems to work.
Well, absolutely. It's been proven that a peer will listen to a peer and trust them much more easily than someone in authority. And that's why it's important when talking to anybody about these things at any level, at any stage of risk, at anywhere on the continuum, is that you don't tell them anything. You show them a model and you ask them, where were you in this model? Where are you in this model? And where will you be in this model? They're the ones that have a conversation with themselves. And if there's a story included, which there is in my model, then they love hearing it from their peers because that's who they relate to. And an interesting statistic that kind of comes around to the other side, more low-risk people die on college campuses than high-risk and severe risk combined, because the low-risk people see the high-risk people as low risk too. Right. They think their peers are low risk, or they don't want to think of them as not being low risk. So rather than understand what's going on, they just try and treat them like they would treat themselves, and they're the ones that go through the windshield because they're not driving. That's the kind of stuff we're trying to avoid. Different consequences at different levels by having everybody understand where they really are. And that way I don't have to tell them anything, and they can be responsible. And that's the difference between then and now. Thanks, Jeffrey.
Awesome. Thanks, Pat. Ryan, what's your thoughts on that?
So just to follow up on, of course, everything that Jeffrey put in there, I mean, in specific to young people, without peer recovery, just to be clear, I would be dead today. I am someone who went through, over a very long period of time, over 10 years, multiple substance use centers, multiple mental health centers. My first brush with mental health treatment was actually when I was 17 years old. as a result of a suicide attempt. And I was in a mental health facility for 2 weeks and got out, and probably was worse than when I was in, right? Because I did not, I was in a room that I was like right on the cusp of the adult versus the adolescent. And they put me with the adults, and I was in a room with an adult. I did not relate. I had a very hard time relating to folks that I was with. I thought, this is their problem, not me. I'm here by mistake, et cetera, et cetera. The value of one peer helping another, of one person with lived experience who's on a similar plane as the other person, is just unparalleled value, right? And folks will often ask, what do we do about prevention? How are we going to solve these rising numbers, in overdoses, rising youth substance use that's going on? We need to throw more money at prevention. We need more, speakers in schools. We need, and this is not to knock on any of that, because I know that there's value in these things, but speakers in schools, and we need more conferences, and we need more, victory clubs for the kids, and, all this thing. And I'm like, the answer's sitting right in front of your face. And that's embedding peers, youth peers in these schools.
Yeah.
Like if we had, and I mean, we should be training a youth peer workforce in this country, and at least piloting it in different places, because it's something that's scientifically, proven to work. But sadly, and not to like get into the politics of it, that is a disruptive answer. And people don't like disruption because it tips the apple cart for, funding that's been around for a long time. So I think we know what to do. It's that we just need the courage, to really step out and call it what it is, and say, well, if we're going to fix this youth mental health crisis, or even have a chance at fixing it, then we need to have trust in Gen Z, that we can train them up as peers and give them the skills that work for us, and let them work with their peers to help solve these issues. One quick story: in Clark County, Nevada, where I live, Las Vegas, last week I was on a Zoom call with the State Behavioral Health Authority, where we had a bunch of parents who showed up who were up in arms. 3 parents in one school. Their kids were experiencing one was having a suicidal ideation. 2 of them were in the midst of a mental health crisis. The policy and procedure in Clark County Public Schools, when there is a mental health crisis with a middle schooler, is to call the parents and tell them to come pick up their kid and bring them home. If that doesn't work, and we know that sending them home sometimes is worse, right? And if that doesn't work, the policy is to call the police. That's what we resort to in one of the larger cities in the United States. It's unconscionable.
Wow. Yeah, that's if there was a mic drop we could do today, that would be it, Ryan. I love this idea of this youth peer workforce, and this is exactly the motivation behind this Empower Youth first virtual event tonight. Was, we sit there and we talk as adults, and we share these ideas, and we get home to try to translate and have these conversations, and then a life event gets in the way, and we never have these conversations. And so it's like, let's bring in the younger generation. Let's talk about obviously the issues, but I've pivoted too, Ryan. I think you and I talked about this. And initially I was at Angry Fentanyl Dad. I mean, I was out there. I was mad. That was Angry Alcohol Dad, And finally, I kind of went to prevention for a little bit. And I thought, well, prevention's fear-based. There's nothing inspirational about telling someone, don't do drugs, you'll die. There's nothing motivating in there. And to change behavior, you can inspire or scare people. So I'm like, okay, how about empowerment? How about telling these young people out there all the great things there is about living, and letting them experience them on themselves. They make their own mistakes, they learn, and make mistakes and learn, instead of playing the prevention game too much, where we're telling them what they shouldn't be doing. I know Patrick wants to say something, but I want to get Soraya in here for a second and have her talk a little bit about what Young People in Recovery is doing with prevention, and then what you think about empowerment as well. Then we'll have Patrick wrap it up.
Absolutely. So Young People in Recovery is actually a peer recovery support services organization. And our name is a bit of a misnomer. We're called Young People in Recovery because we were founded by Young People in Recovery, and we do serve a lot of youth, but we serve all ages. So our goal is really to bring as many peer recovery support services into as many communities as possible. And I think youth empowerment has a lot to do with that, right? I think in the last few years, we at YPR have really invested a lot more time in youth, and also we've really been trying to target communities that have been historically and systemically underserved, especially when we talk about substance use disorder. So we have really been trying to use peer recovery support services to boost that empowerment, right? I think the great thing about peer recovery is that it's not, it's really, it is empowering, right? Because it's about building yourself a network. It's about building connections for yourself. It's about building the life that you want to live, a healthy life that's centered on wellness and recovery, right? Yeah, so those are my thoughts.
Those are beautiful thoughts. Patrick, do you want to put a bow tie on that?
I sure would. I've certainly enjoyed it, and I wish everyone well. And we are in the middle of a battle, and I think we can get better. And I think it's this is a good step towards that way. I trained peer educators at the Collegiate Recovery Center because that's part of their service work. They went out to help other people by presenting prehab to the freshman orientation classes. I went to a national conference on like the CRC, where they have peer educators, and I showed them prehab. That was the most high-risk bunch of students I'd run into outside of fraternities. They were not low-risk people. They weren't necessarily autonomous. They were kids, and they were carrying not the solution. But I still think good came out of it, and that was what I was trying to find out. How much good are we actually doing? We know what doesn't work, so what are we doing and does it work? And I did find a measurement, and that's why I'm confident in saying, if you present something to somebody, they don't learn something about themselves, they were not empowered. And if you can't measure it, you can't measure it. And I think that's the paradigm shift we're coming into. But it is, we're all brainwashed. It's hard to describe that. This is a typical result. So that's
so
it
Pat,
for me.
how do people get in touch with you and in your book Prehab, which really runs off this notion of preventative pieces as opposed to the reactionary? How do people get in touch with you, and how do they get a copy of that excellent work?
Yeah, the book itself is on Amazon. There is a Kindle version. It's called Prehab, and of course, I'm got a website with everything on there, including the research and whatever else, and the program itself. If you want to see what the program looks like, it's free. It's at prehabmap.com. Anybody can show it. Any of your peer counselors can show it anytime they want. It's on video. It's on YouTube. If you can hit play, you can show it. So Prehab, Prehab, map, MAPP, 2 P's in map.com.
And I've read the book. Full endorsement. I've read the book. I highlighted it. One of those books I had sticky notes all over the place. So speaking of books, Patrick, thank you. Ryan, do you want to just a minute or two about your book you have coming out, and then we'll get into the commercial and the last segment on healthy relationships with money.
Yes, thank you for the plug. My third book is coming out September 3rd, 2024. More will be revealed within the next couple of weeks. My publisher will kill me if I get ahead of it. But in the new year, there'll be an official announcement. It's being published by St. Martin's Press. Topic is fentanyl, both that we're experiencing, the misinformation about it, and some of the solutions that we should be considering. And there's a huge chunk of it that is focused on youth. So looking forward to getting it out there. And in the meantime, you can check out my other 2 books, American Fix and Unsettled.
I've read those as well. Highly endorse them. No, this is great. I didn't know if Jacob or Soraya, if you have any last words you want to say before we ride off into the sunset.
I guess I can put in a quick plug. If you are interested in peer recovery resources or bringing more of those to your city, YPR is always looking for volunteers. We are always giving out resources. You can find out more information at youngpeopleinrecovery.org.
I guess back to you guys,
just-
and we'll wrap it up.
I just want to say thank you guys for having me on. So I appreciate it.
Well, thank you. For
Absolutely, Jacob. And it's a pleasure to have you. Pat, Ryan, Soraya, what you folks are doing is, again, you're creating that dialogue. You're creating that opportunity. Jacob, thank you, pal, for coming and joining us and sharing your story. Soraya, amazing stuff. Mr. Pat Moore, again, if you have an opportunity to read these books, it's that preemptive stuff. It's getting down to the core of what is causing some of these issues. Ryan, Mobilize Recovery. You folks are doing amazing work as well. And I appreciate you guys for coming. The next segment we're going to touch base on is, again, kind of that developing healthy relationships around money, whether that be gambling, whether that be stock market. All of these things have different addictive characteristics. And as a young generation coming up, it's going to be super important. We'll be right back after this commercial, folks. Thank you.
The center was created and formally announced in June of 2021, and it began really as the brainchild of our dean, Dan Clay, of the College of Education.
During COVID, the additional stresses on mental health really became kitchen table conversations for the first time, and we were well positioned at that time to provide services and additional help around the state in mental health. So we, working with the State Department of Ed, we developed a center to address the problem.
The key objective of the Scanlon Center is to serve as the state's hub for school-based mental health services. And so with that, we are really aiming to improve the social, emotional, behavioral, and psychological outcomes of both students and educators.
Mental health is actually just one part of a larger spectrum of well-being. And so while we talk about mental health as being the thing, mental health is often sometimes the outcome of something else that's not going well. There is research that says that if students slept better and more consistently, 30% of them would stop going to counseling immediately. And so while we look at mental health as the issue, sometimes mental health is the outcome. And people just need to sleep better, eat better, socialize more regularly, exercise, and those kinds of things. And so we're seeing sort of the growth of a larger well-being perspective on campus. And that's a really cool, exciting thing to be part of.
A couple of our key clinical services at the Scanlon Center for School Mental Health Clinic are short-term individual and group therapy that we provide to the K-12 population of students as well as educators, and then offering post-crisis debriefing and support. So we're able to go into schools following a crisis event, work with the crisis team that's on site to provide some ongoing support to the school staff and the students. The goal of the clinical service arm of the Scanlon Center for School Mental Health is really to reduce barriers to accessing mental health treatment, to then support the mental health needs of K-12 students and educators across the state.
The learning and training opportunities in the center are abundant. We have anywhere from asynchronous modules that educators can tap into for free. There's a series of 18 different modules that focus on various topics related to school mental health and educator and student wellness. We have different types of training, certified trainings, things such as youth mental health first aid, teen mental health first aid, QPR, question, persuade, refer. It's a suicide prevention, postvention training. And then we also do individualized plans for schools.
One of the goals of our center is just to create a bigger workforce of trained professionals in the mental health fields that will go work in our schools and in our agencies in our rural districts, especially where they're mostly underserved.
I think our center is unique in several ways. We provide professional development, research, training, and clinical services. A lot of centers across the country maybe do one or two of those things, but we do all of them.
It's all about interdisciplinary collaboration. We have individuals that have expertise in public health, in school mental health, in psychiatry, in education, in social work, in school nursing. So.
Well, folks, again, I want to take the time here and thank some of our sponsors. Again, Iowa Scanlon Center for School of Mental Health. That's what we were just looking at there. And you can see that they put a lot of time and effort and passion into what they're doing and helping people. I want to thank Innovia with the behavioral health aspect, as well with Brighton. Obviously, Jeff, you've been a pivotal part of this today, bringing this to light and having these conversations. And moving into this next one, which really hits home for me. Again, with Soaring Profits, I do a piece around financial fitness. and we talk about markets, we talk about investing, we talk about wealth creation and management. And one of the things that as a youth, you see the Lambos and you see the bikini models and you see all of the things that go along with it. But that's a weird perception, and the relationships that we have with money and that persona. And I first of all, I want to introduce our panel here. So first of all, obviously we got Jeff. Jeff, I'm not going to talk to you again because we've done this 14 times. Patrick Chester is a program facilitator at Epic Risk Management. Patrick down in the corner there. Thank you for joining us, pal. Ian John Stone, owner of Tribute Kicks and a former collegiate golfer. Not going to go golfing with you because
you don't want to golf. Ian's my son too. I'll throw that out there.
Family connection. I love it.
Yeah.
And Will Frazier, D1. What do we got?
You don't want to golf with Will either. Trust me.
Yeah, there's a few guys I'm not taking and buying beers for. Lewis, former competitive golfer and finance major. We're just rounding it out. So
yeah,
I want to thank you folks today. Money is such an interesting topic because we all need money. It drives a lot of our motivations in life. But how do we, as youth, how do we have those relationships? Maybe Patrick, I'll kind of chat with you first in regards to your story, a little bit about who you are, and maybe a little bit of the advice.
Sure. Yeah. Well, hey, Patrick, nice name too, by the way. But,
thanks, pal.
Yeah. No, it's great. It's great to be here. Just to share a little bit about me, not too much, but just a little bit about me. Money. Yeah. We've all heard the saying, right? Money doesn't always buy happiness. Well, maybe not, but financial stability goes a long way, into making life a little bit better and a little bit less stressful. And I spent 15 years with a big time gambling problem, ended up losing over $1 million. And it's taken me 8.5 years to basically get my feet back on the ground. And so money is critical. How we manage it. In my case, I fell into a big time gambling addiction, and saw things as a child that manifested themselves later on in life that I wasn't prepared for, and so what I do now is I travel the country and I speak with, and I say that very carefully. I speak with 18 to 20-year-olds. I don't speak to,
right,
because I want to have a conversation and I want to learn from the younger generation as much as they can learn from me, so that's kind of where I come from, my perspective on this.
Well, I just wanted to throw out there too, and thanks, Patrick. He was on my podcast. We had and I was a compulsive gambler for about 20 years as I was running a wealth management firm. So I don't talk about that a lot, but that's a fact. The reason why I wanted to have this topic was when I was doing my research for our Brighton app, there was this elephant in the room conversation no one ever had. They always talked about, purpose and health and all that, but it seems like there wasn't a lot of discussions about a healthy relationship with money. I started diving into the evidence and saying, okay, where can I validate this? And then lo and behold, I saw that statistic or that quote, the number one stressor for older Gen Z was financial insecurity. And then I did some more research and found out about 63% of American adults live paycheck to paycheck. Okay. And now you have gambling on the phones. So there's all this poor things out there with relationships and money. So I'm going to talk to the three gentlemen here. So Ian, I know your story well. I'm going to come back to you in a second. Will as well. Really appreciate it. And Louise, you jumping on as well as all three of you guys are finance majors. Okay. So you guys are going to college to learn about money. Is there more to a finance degree than just learning about money? Are you learning anything emotionally about money?
Yeah, I can start. I guess for me, in my position, everybody's different. So you have to, go back to your values and see what's important to you. When I was younger, I used to spend everything I had. And obviously going into college, you have to cut down your budgets excessively. And none of that is really taught. You have to go through the emotions, go through the losses, and that goes along with gambling as well. And, you learn to cut your expenses. And for me, when I was learning a lot of finance, I'm studying investment banking. I love the approach of planning out your budget, for the month or for the year, and having those long-term goals, and then bringing them back down, one by one, in small pieces. So it's a little brief thing that I brought up.
Will, what are you learning as a finance major that's more than just the math behind money?
Yeah, definitely. I think that just more than the money, I think there's a lot of the kind of like you said, Jeff, the emotional side of it. I think that's a piece that's probably missing quite a bit when you look at the curriculums for colleges, high schools. I don't think there's kind of just sitting here reflecting on it. I don't think there's a lot of situations in where I've been talked to by professors or talked with professors about, the decisions that actually come with this. It's more so just the true stats behind it and kind of what's going on with the money, not how are we thinking about the money, thinking towards the future. What are we going to do with that money is kind of like a missing piece, I would say, a little bit.
Yeah. And the next question is for Ian. So thanks, Will. Appreciate that. No, I would love to see your generation all become entrepreneurs. I mean, all learn how to start businesses, all take those risks. We need a generation of young men and women behind us that are the next risk takers, the next Elon Musks, Jeff Bezos, to change the world. Ian, you're not there yet, but you started a shoe company right out of high school, right out of college, and you named it Tribute Kicks, and it has a special meaning, and I'd like to have you talk about that. But as an entrepreneur, you're a little bit ahead of these guys. You graduated, 2 years ago, or 1 year?
Last year. Yeah.
Finance. Yeah. I'm getting there. I have another son I get confused on as well. But no, so you went into right out of college. I mean, you didn't have a job. You came to me and said, Dad, I want to start this thing. Talk about the fears, the concerns you had with being an entrepreneur right out of college and with a finance degree in hand, no less.
Yeah, I mean, so I like resell shoes. That's essentially what I've been doing since like my junior or sophomore year of college. Always been pretty big into shoes and stuff. So, I wanted to take it and actually turn it into a business versus a hobby. So yeah, this year I kind of approached my dad and then one of my really good buddies at the time, who's now my business partner, that, we should just, let's just turn it into a business. Let's make a store, let's take a big risk and, let's just try to go after it. And especially, in today's market where, it's pretty tough to start a business in my opinion. And, it was pretty fearful at the start because we didn't know how it would turn out. We didn't know, if people would show up or anything or, how we do, especially because we're opening up in a mall. So first of all, it's gonna be pretty expensive. We didn't know, if we're going to be able to cover rent, stuff like that. So I guess the money was really big for us, just like the concern of not having it if we needed it. That kind of makes sense, especially because we wouldn't know how it was going to turn out, and it's turned out a lot better than we thought we would have. A lot better than we thought it would have.
And the name Tribute, explain the meaning behind
that.
that.
So the name Tribute, so we tribute it to essentially people who have passed away and stuff like that. That's kind of what our meaning is behind, because for us it's more than shoes. I feel like a lot of other sneaker stores just are after the money, kind of stuff like that. We're actually here donating. So every single month we donate a percentage of our profits to some organizations. So like in November we did a canned food drive. I think we donated over like 150 pounds of food, bunch of stuff like that. And then every month, I think we donated to Mobilize Recovery, ASAC, and Cedar Rapids. So, we're trying to do a lot of local stuff too. But basically, Tribute is just tributing to those, who are either struggling or have passed away.
Well, I think, Jeff, that's one that's obviously got to get you as a father, right? You see a young man like yourself that's coming up and doing amazing things. And I've got a 14-year-old daughter who everything that I do in my life is trying to give her a platform to jump off of. And one of the things that I kind of want to touch base around this money aspect is that these young men are growing up in a generation and an era of the stock market being at your fingertips and this new accessibility of the gambling aspect that is brought in through, Robinhood apps. We saw with the GameStop aspect of the last couple of years, the meme stocks, crypto, all of these things, which again, I talk about on Financial Fitness with Soaring Profits. But this is a totally different, uncharted territory for young men, especially. And maybe you guys can talk a little bit about some of those things. Like I know personally myself, I've had 6-figure months. That's up, that's down, that's all around. But those situations can become just as bad as, waiting for that field goal, whether they make it or not.
Well, and Patrick can jump on this. You're exactly right, Patrick. And I'm the other Patrick. We have too many Patricks on the show tonight, by the way. But the proliferation of gambling on the cell phones is a big problem. And I was watching a YouTube thing, and they had a clip from a business talk about, I won't say the name of the gambling site, but Patrick, you probably know it real well. That they said that their revenues have doubled every single year for the last 4 years. And what they say, it's okay. I wrote the name down, but I don't want to say it. But the fact that 63% of young men today are single and 50% of them don't want to date. A lot of them now are just being preoccupied with the ability to get on their phone and bet. And then with live betting, Patrick, you can bet literally on every play all the way through the game because the odds move. I just paid my bookie in the back alley and hope I didn't get my legs broken, on Saturday night. That's how we did it back in the day. Today, it's like buying M&Ms at the grocery store. I mean, so Patrick, where do you see the future of this, and how do we can't stop it. I'm not going to get these apps off phones. There's too many athletes and celebrities that are making too much money on this. How do we get these young men and young women to think about something else?
Yeah, I mean, you laid that out well, Jeff. For me, it's well, first of all, let me back up a little bit. I see these ads, right? FanDuel, DraftKings on TV. And a lot of times you'll see somebody like Kevin Hart or Drew Brees or some well-known figure that is promoting not only betting, but prop betting. You can bet live betting, all this stuff. And so the younger generation, and Ian and the guys can speak to this better than I can. I don't know how they're receiving that, but from what I see, all they're getting is the positive, the glorification of this.
Yeah.
There's no downside to it. Just sign up for $5 and you're going to get your $200 in free bets because this is great. And so the way I describe it, Jeff, is the train has left the station. We threw all of this at our younger generation about 3 or 4 years ago when we legalized sports betting in this country with no education, no awareness, nothing, right? And a case, a good case study for us is what's going on over in the UK right now, because they've been betting on sports legally for a lot longer than we have here. And the suicide rate over there is ridiculous. Okay. And so this goes into the mental health side of it too. But, I think it's just about raising awareness and educating, guys like, Ian and everybody that's on here, right? That age group, letting them know, hey, well, this is what can happen if you're not careful, if you lose perspective. And for me, it was like, I lost the respect for the value of $1, right? It's like, to me, it was just part of what was going to feed it. And, so it's a tangled web, that we're in right now. And it's just a matter of getting out there in front of it.
Yeah, I know. Luis, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, it's funny you brought it up because there's a lot of people promoting, betting and that it's all the glory. Today, I was sitting lunch with an acquaintance that I knew through a friend, and he was watching basketball, pegged on his phone, and he was letting me. He's like, "Hey, Luis, I look at this. Look at what I won yesterday. I won so many hundreds of dollars, and I couldn't even believe how much he was betting." And he was like, "Let me know if you need any picks. Like, I got you." And it's almost like, I'm receiving financial advice from a college student, and I'm going to be rich off that. And I think it's good to get perspective and understand that, if that was the case, we'd all be here. Same thing with crypto, and Robinhood. I mean, you can buy portions of shares.
Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, they're trying to make it as easy as possible to purchase any amount of stock of whatever, and crypto's even more volatile now, and that's almost like a religion, trading, and none of that comes from any valuation techniques.
Well, I think people are going to be excited when they see, and this is the only real pitch I'll have towards the Brighton app, but the curriculum we have on there with Wealth is really, it was fun for me to write it, fun for me to record it. We talk about all these things. One video I have is called Learn About FOMO Investing, Fear of Missing Out. And that is so prevalent with a lot of people today. It used to be back in the day, we heard a hot tip at a cocktail party. Well, now you just can hear them everywhere. And again, crypto and all that. But I wanted to ask Will a question. Do you think there's a difference between, let's say, an investor and a gambler? Do you think there's a wholesale difference philosophically between the two?
Yeah, I do. I think that's a really good question. I think kind of to go look at the gambling side of it first, I think that honestly, there's not many positives that can come out of it at the end of the day. I mean, obviously, looking at kind of what happened with Patrick and his situation, I think it's way more common than what people might think. And no, obviously, they wouldn't have all these gambling sites if they weren't making a ton of money off of it.
Right.
In the end, it's pretty much impossible to beat the odds, so to say. I think with investing, I think looking at it from that side of the spectrum, I think you can get more educated on it and do it correctly. Jeff, you know quite a bit about it, having your own book of business and stuff like that. I think there's more positives. There's like things that can be good if you're educated and do the right things. I don't see much good coming out of gambling. Even if you do win, you're kind of, there's this thought in the back of your mind where it's like, yeah, but it was on gambling and I just got lucky. And what if I lost that because someone didn't make that field goal or make that 3-point attempt? It's just like, there's nothing to it really. In my
A good friend of mine back in college, Will, used to say, even when you win, you lose.
Yeah.
And it was that's the, when I used to be a compulsive gambler, when I went to a casino and I took $1,000 or $2,000 or $5,000, I didn't want to just double my money. I wanted to take all the money that the casino had. I had no goal. The goal was either I walk in there with all the money or I go out broke. And every single time I went out broke. But one thing I used to tell clients, guys, when I used to manage an investment firm, we used to say that the difference between an investor and a gambler is one word, and that's time. A gambler never has time. An investor always has time. That's the difference between the two. If you look at the mindset of an investor, you buy, Warren Buffett, you don't look at your stuff for 20, 30 years. You've got the benefit of time. A gambler's always either trying to get that high or win to pay back somebody else. Ian, do you think there's some similarities in being an entrepreneur and gambling? I mean, do you see the risk taking that goes in being an entrepreneur, or do you think that's a different type of gambling?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it definitely could be a big risk because, you're not guaranteed anything, or definitely in the future. You definitely, could lose a lot, especially as an entrepreneur and at this time. But yeah, I definitely think that there's definitely a few similarities.
Do you feel comfortable sharing the story when you were selling shoes in your apartment and you made that order? And this was almost the end of your selling career. And then what happened? Will you talk about the situation and when I told you?
Was it the one where I got scammed?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is a good lesson for everybody.
So essentially, when I first started reselling, I was pretty new, and I decided to do this deal. I agreed to this deal, and I decided to do it's called GUA, which means gift upon arrival. So this is very stupid. Like I said, I'm brand new to the thing and everything. And so essentially, I ship him the shoes. He legit checks them, everything, which is actually
how much money worth the shoes?
Like $2,500 worth.
Yeah, but back then that was everything you had in your business.
All my inventory. So basically, GUA means you ship, he authenticates, then he pays you, which is actually very common. And yeah, he sent me all of his references and everything, and it looked legit. And then he ended up blocking me as soon as I shipped the shoes. So I essentially lost it all, and I basically came to my dad and said, "Yeah, I'm done. I just lost all my."
Well, you were crying. Don't lie.
I was very upset. Yeah, that was a lot of money to me at the time, and it still is, but I was very upset. And like I said, that was all my inventory, and I was very down. And he told me basically just to keep going, and now look where it is. So
I said a little more than that. I said,
yeah.
What I said. I go, Ian, when you're talking to colleges about successful entrepreneurship, you're going to tell this story when you almost quit. And I told you this will be the greatest lesson you could possibly have in being an entrepreneur, more than any finance class can ever teach you.
Yes.
That's the difference between quantitative education on money versus qualitative in the emotional aspect. Losing everything you had at 21 years old is the best tuition you could possibly pay, hands down. That's the difference between somebody learning all this stuff in college and then never going out and applying it in real life. So I told Ian he was going to quit and everything. I said, no, you're not. And we ended up, you had some stocks that he had since he was a boy, little boy. Now he's 6'6". We sold enough stocks to put it back in his account. And now, if you like to share your numbers in 6 months, how much revenue have you guys done in 6 months?
So currently we are a little over 500,000 at the moment.
Great. Gross sales in 6 months.
Very well done.
But it wasn't easy. And I like to tell that story for any young person out there starting a business. You can get scammed. You lose money on investments. You make the wrong decisions. Maybe you gamble it away. There's always a brighter side. There's always somebody that you can learn from. And, you know, Ian's far from being a successful entrepreneur. 6 months is not a career, trust me. But he was definitely somebody, and there's a lot of people out there. And Louise, I don't know, and Will, have you guys talked about becoming entrepreneurs? Or I know you said investment banking, I think. Was that right? One of you two? Okay. Have you thought about being an entrepreneur and being self-employed?
Yeah, I think that would stem from, you know, building a niche first. I think I need to get in the industry, really understand what it is I really love. And I know that starting a business is really difficult. So I'd have to know the ins and outs of it. That's certainly something that I want to do coming out, you know, if not private equity, hedge funds. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what's your thoughts on being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think definitely interested in being an entrepreneur in the golf industry, just in terms of starting my own small business with a couple other guys from here in Minnesota.
Cool.
Give golf lessons. We're actually going to start a podcast here shortly with a PGA Tour caddy. So kind of combining those things together as somewhat of a side gig to maybe a full-time job in investment, stuff like that. Just really excited to kind of have these preliminary discussions with these guys, just because there's actual substance behind it. They're 28 to 32 years old.
That's
and
cool.
Have the kind of, these guys are 10 years ahead of me, and they just believe in what I'm doing, and kind of the vision that we all have is very similar. So it's super exciting. And I hope, honestly, in the next couple of years that could just become full-time, but while that's coming off the ground, probably have a couple different sources of income.
Well, here's a financial question. So for $100 to make a 10-foot putt, me or Ian?
I gotta go Ian on that
What?
one.
Come on. You've never seen me putt, man. Ask Ian. I'm a good putter.
Hey, not too bad.
Wow.
That is funny.
Well, and when you launch that podcast, I know a couple of guys who could probably give you a hand with that as well.
Yeah, perfect.
Shameless plug there. Patrick, you've been hearing some of what these gentlemen are saying, and obviously, you know, the stuff that they're talking about is really hitting home for their generations. Maybe you can give a little insight into regards some of the pitfalls along the way of, you know, owning your own business, having that capital, and then kind of watching some of those risks as you're going through there. Maybe you can comment on that.
Yeah, good question. And you know, first of all, I love what Will said, you know, the story, and Luis and Ian. You know, there is risk, right? And some of the knowledge I have now, I mean, I got a good education and all of that, went to school and did all of that. But the best education I got, like Jeff said, was through experience, through failures. I've learned more through that than any classroom, you know, but you know, some of the pitfalls, right? You know, I own my own business, you know, and I fell into an addiction while running my own business as an entrepreneur. Sole proprietor. I was working for myself. I was responsible for payroll, for materials, for, you know, a construction project, a $70,000 job. You know, there's a lot of contractors I need to pay, and when they do their work, and if they don't get paid on time, they're pissed, right? They don't like that. And so I didn't manage that well, because I was also managing trying to deal with a big time gambling problem at the same time. And so it's about obviously knowing, having things in place, right? You know, I didn't do that either. I was just flying by the seat of my pants. I didn't have a good plan, right? You know, and these guys sounds like they've got a plan, and that's what you need. You need a plan in place, because if you fall behind or something happens and you can't manage it, it's amazing how quickly things can turn. You know, I for example, as a big time gambler, I dollars out of a project deposit one time, thinking in my head, you know what, I'm going to double or triple that up, boom, and I'll get this job going, no problem. Well, that was gone in 2 days,
right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's you know, that speaks to a little bit of the addiction side and that, but it's really about just management, system, a plan, and taking baby steps at the beginning until you get your feet on the ground. You know, that's what I would say.
Yeah. Will, Louise, and Ian, how important is goal setting when it comes to having a good relationship with money and budgeting, those two issues?
Yeah, I can take this one. I think goal setting, as far as, I mean, not only money and all that stuff, but probably anything in your life is super, super important, because I think that when you set a goal, then you have a vision and you have like a place that you want to get to. And then you can set smaller goals to get to that place. And I think, I mean, if we kind of just round that all up into empowering youth, mental health, all this kind of stuff, that's something for all of younger kids, adults, anyone, to have something to focus on, have something to strive for and to look forward to, and to continue that progress to, I mean, that's going to help mental health. That's going to help with anxiety, depression, because at the end of the day, I think that some of this stuff, a lot of it comes from not really knowing what's next, not knowing what to do, feeling lost. And I think goals are really, really important.
Yeah.
I'd like to jump in just for a second. I'm not a big financial guy, but I did find, so a long time ago when I was younger, I hung around people who didn't know money, didn't know how to strive, not business people like you. We dealt in humans and like psychology and counseling and stuff like that. Not a lot of money thought into that. So when you surround yourself with money people like Pat, you start learning stuff quicker. Do you find that it is better if you surround yourself with other people who are high in finance? Is that the people you're looking to go in business with? Or are you looking for varied skill levels when you're doing it? Who do you want to partner up with?
Yeah, I would say initially teaming up with people like Pat would be very helpful, just to keep learning, because I think kind of my opinion is, like, even if you learn a lot of this stuff in college, there's so much that is not taught in college that you will learn probably within the first couple months at working for whatever you're doing, like insurance, investments, that's like the real life aspects of that you don't see right away. I think that working with all different types of people, like you said, James, is important. But I think being younger, you kind of need that mentor, need that one voice that you trust to give you that continuous like guidance and teach you the personal side of it, emotional, and like just the number side of it too.
Yeah, I think in our day and age, we, especially in like for my age, we want to do everything ourselves. Like we feel like we don't need anybody's help. So why would I have a mentor when at the end of the day I'll just I'll be rich and I'll have all this fun, and I'll look back and I'll know that all that was me. I did it myself. But like, why not get a fast track? And there's people who are decades older than you who've gone through this a million times. They're telling it to your face, and that's all going to happen in the future. Well, you don't know, but you think it won't happen, and you don't take their advice. I don't know. Yeah, I think it's really true to have that agency and encouragement to use your resources around you. And that's something that we need to make sure we advocate for.
I just want to say that he mentioned decades older while we were talking about Pat. Decades older while we were talking about Pat.
I do want to
happen for me often.
Jump on one word that he said that I think is a very important word for a younger generation versus is the definition of the word rich. See, you guys, I say you guys, but the younger generation thinks as rich as financially rich. Okay. Whereas you get older, it's rich in knowledge, wisdom, relationships, those type of things. And I was that guy, Louise. I was that 23-year-old starting an investment firm, knocking on doors, selling life insurance. I did all that. And as I went through my life and I had the big house, the cars, traveled, lost a lot of that, lost half my family, I finally realized what rich really meant to me. And it was through all those experiences I became a better person. And so if I could just give one word of wisdom to the younger generation is try to think of what rich means to you. What does happiness mean to you? And literally write it down in your journal. And I almost guarantee you, as you get older and look back in your journal, that you will have changed the feeling and the connotation for those words. Rich to me, wealth to me, I don't think about money at all. And this is ironic. I mean, I was a financial advisor for 34 years. When I say the word wealth, I think of a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of relationships. And so I just wanted to know if do you guys feel that way about things like rich and happiness and success as tying it to money? Or do you guys think that you are a little bit further ahead than maybe your average peer out there your age? It's a deep question, I know.
Yeah, I think, I mean, obviously, Jeff, we've had a lot of discussions about kind of when I was at South Dakota State, mental health crisis kind of deal, early 2021. I don't think I've ever looked at my life in terms of being rich, in terms of money. I think luckily, kind of with my mom and dad being pretty financially stable, I was always going to be okay at that younger age. Kind of knew they were going to help me cover college and stuff like that. I think that in the way that looking at rich and that has changed for me since then is kind of just like you're saying too, after you lost obviously your wife and then son, you just change what your outlook on life is, what rich really means. It's kind of more for me now is kind of having that inner peace, just waking up and knowing that like everything's going to be all right again, you know? And so I think that when you kind of shift your perspective on rich from being money, money, money to like relationships, that's like for me when a lot of good things start to happen.
Yeah, I know we're coming up on the clock here to end this show. It's been a phenomenal first show ever. Anybody have any last items they want to throw in there, and then we'll have to cut it up and end it. And really appreciate everybody's attention tonight and time.
Don't all talk at once. I think I'm going to tell you right now, I have been blown away by the youth that you have brought on here, Jeff. They're wise. I wish I had an inch of their wisdom even 10 years ago, let alone at the age they're at. What they know about finance, what they know about like how to deal with others. I'm telling you right now, Maya and Riley blew me away how they deal with social media. I just think it's amazing, and a lot can be learned from these guys. I would check out Will's podcast. It's coming up. I don't know what he's going to call it. Will, what's this podcast going to be called, and how do we find it?
We're still working on it, but the first thing, Ian will like this. It's going to be, our first idea is spray and pray. So hit it all over the place. And you can find it.
Hey, you've been golfing with James and I.
Yeah, you're talking about mentors there, Will. So if you need some help with that, you call us. We'd be happy to help you out, give you a leg up. We've done a couple of podcasts on our way. Ian, why don't you tell us about your shoes, where we can get them, what we can do to buy them, and basically that.
So essentially, we don't have a website at the moment
yet.
We're building one. It's in the works. So that'll be like tributekicks.com. We have an Instagram, same thing, just called Tribute Kicks. A lot of our inventory is on there. But that'd probably be the best place to find us for sure.
And Patrick, maybe you can make a couple comments there finally, and a little bit of advice for these young gentlemen moving forward in an industry that can truly eat people. Some of the most successful young men that I've come across in my life, these are gentlemen, whether they be professional athletes or folks that do very well in business. It's often a death sentence. And walking that back a little bit and understanding. And I believe the gentlemen that we have here today, they have that emotional maturity that is going to hopefully differentiate them. But maybe Patrick, you can talk a little bit about that and as we wrap it up.
Yeah, for sure. And I just want to say real quick before I forget, Will, Louise, Ian, extremely impressed with all three of you guys. You all seem obviously have great heads on your shoulders and grounded and good perspective. That's awesome to see. But I have seen, like Patrick just mentioned, I've come across former NFL players, former Major League Baseball players that had everything, had all the money, all the millions, and then they got away from that and they had nothing. They had a void, right? They had a void in their life. So whatever career you have and it is going great and you're making all the money, these guys had all the money and they started gambling and lost, in many cases, lost it all. You know, and so it's just there's a fine line, you know, and it's all about, you know, if we do have voids in our life, constructively filling that void, you know, and not gravitating towards to take away from all the hard work we put into where we're at.
Yeah, we're losing a little bit, Patrick. Plus,
it's awesome what you guys are doing.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. I'm sorry to have to cut you off there, but we do got to wrap this up. We got about a minute and a half. So Everybody tonight, this has been a great show. I plan on us doing this again. Patrick, James, you guys want to wrap this up, and then I can say a final word and we'll get out of here.
Go ahead, Pat.
Absolutely, we sure can. James, I think you've got, you're bringing it slowly as the guys come in here, but I want to thank all of you for joining us. These sorts of conversations is how we're going to change some of the outcomes. If we can't talk about mental health, if we can't talk about our youth, what are we expecting them to live? What sort of lifestyle are we hoping for them? And this is our next generation, right? Myself, I've got a 14-year-old daughter, and James and I talk at Soaring Profits all the time. You can check us out, shameless plug, YouTube, all the social media platforms. But we talk all the time about giving them that platform to leap off of and jump off of. And Jeff, I've had the privilege to meet your son. I see what you're doing for him and what Brighton is allowing you to do with that curriculum that you've built in. I want to thank you. I want to thank you for the invitation from us to be able to come and join you, and an amazing group of youth, a fantastic group of people that are highly motivated, driven, but also that emotional intelligence that they bring to the table.
Well, thanks for
I'm
making
super
this.
excited to see what these folks do. And from me, I want to thank all of you at Soaring Profits. My sign off is always, let's make some money together, folks. And I think that really holds true. And whether you're investing in the stock market or you're investing in the youth of tomorrow, like what Jeffrey is doing with Brighton, I want to thank you all.
Yeah, Jeff, I want to thank you for allowing Soaring Profits to come and give you a little help here. The people you have brought together are life changers. They are going to be the future of our world. And when they get there, it is going to be a brilliant beam of light that is going to change the world. Because where they're at now, it took me years to learn, and they're already there. And I just think what you're doing here with Empower Youth, what you're doing with the Brighton app, everything you're doing to help them, to give them that platform, like Pat said, I think it's amazing. On Soaring Profits, we unveil the stories of champions. And I think to date, we have unveiled the stories of so many young champions that I am so impressed. And I am never at a loss for words, but yet I am. But profiteers out there, if you happen to be watching Empower Youth, let's heal our minds, bodies, and souls together. Jeff, take us out. This has been an amazing show. I can't talk about this enough.
Well, James, another mic drop, man. You guys are hitting home runs tonight. No, I just want to say, I have a saying that I like to say at the end of all my talks: purpose becomes passion when it gets personal. And for me, this is very, very personal. And I didn't think 7 years ago this is what I'd be doing, but 7 years of being a mental health advocate, I've got more meaning and purpose out of being 34 years as a financial advisor. And I'm so grateful to have this opportunity for all the young minds and people coming in here and hearing the different stories and perspectives. And you know what? All we have to do, they didn't invent social media. They didn't invent COVID. They didn't invent prescription pills. We did, the adults did. So I think we need to build the systems and processes, crack that door for them just a little bit, and then get the hell out of their way. Let them take over the world. And they are capable. They're strong. And you know what? They're the largest generation in human history. So we're not going to have a choice. They are going to be taking over the world. And again, great night. Honored to be here. Soaring Profits, you guys did great. Really looking forward to round two. And again, thanks to our sponsors, Scanlon Center for School Mental Health and Inovia Behavioral Health, and of course, Brighton and Living Undeterred.
Most of the focus these days is on youth mental health problems. Empower Youth is about youth mental health solutions.
The event is a conversation with top mental health advocates along with passionate youth mental health promoters.
4 session topics: healthy lifestyle choices, finding meaning and purpose, addiction and substance abuse, and having a healthy relationship with money.
We welcome your input and are excited to answer your questions during the event, which is produced by Soaring Profits, brought to you by Brighton, and sponsored by the Scanlon School for Mental Health and Inovia Brain Health.